pertaining to the Torah, right? And how it's
Wonderful.
implemented through the religion of Judaism and expressed through a person in a position as teacher of a rabbi, right? And everything that means then, now should be consistent. The message that it meant 2,000 years ago and the purpose should be the same now if it's consistent, right?
Well, actually, it's 3,500 years ago is the Torah.
Yeah, but even let's just say from the beginning. Technically, we can say from the beginning of the creation of the Adam.
Sure.
The purpose.
All the way back from the beginning, yeah. Which, of course, take it back to Adam. It's all about disobeying or obeying God, and that is like,
alternative choice. Here we are, Free Thought Unchained. I'm here with Rabbi Israel Horowitz, a new friend. We're here to discuss everything spiritual. We're going to talk about spirituality, the soul, the purpose of life, the difference between good and evil. Where did we come from? Where are we going? And in between the time when we were birthed and when we experienced that concept of death, what are we supposed to be doing, right? What did our ancient ancestors say we're supposed to be doing? That, and there are various forms of religions that have existed since the earliest known formation of the earth, right? There's Sumerians, there's Judaism, there's the variations of the Abrahamic religions, which majority of people, pretty much the world thinks religion is Christian, Catholic, Christian, Muslim, Jews, Buddhist, and Hinduism. And that's pretty much wraps up 90% of what people think there is. And of course, I'm here to give a wider explanation and to paint a wider picture of reality, right? What did our ancestors believe? What did the ancestors right next to them believe? Because most of the time, history is not just written by the victors. History is written by two people that were battling each other to decide, let's unite and rule everyone together. How about that? And that's exactly where we are right now. So I'm happy to have Rabbi Israel Horowitz here. Welcome, Rabbi.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. And then we also have Mendel here in the background. He's going to be able to pull up anything in real time for us to discuss. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I like what you said just first off about finding a universal ethic that could ground humanity. I think that I was always in search of that. And being raised Jewish, ultra-Orthodox, I definitely got a feel for how intense religion is supposed to be. And as you pointed out, for all of human history, religion has existed. It seems to be part and parcel of our nature. Even the atheist movement of recent, trying to dispute that religious instinct, obviously just create their own religion, and they don't really have a response.
Well, science is their God. Their God is science.
Their God is absolutely science. And, it ultimately doesn't bear fruit. And so when we talk about what the purpose of life is and who God is, I think it does require an engagement with the divine. And I like to think of religion as just that, the relationship between man and God. It's us documenting our interactions with the divine. And you have all sorts of interactions that are claimed to happen across history, across time and religions. Yes. But I think there does come a question of truth at some point. And that's something that I had to struggle with coming into adolescence, starting at around age 17. But really at age 19, I kind of rejected entirely what I was brought up with as being the absolute truth. And at that point, I journeyed on almost a solitary road, if you will, to kind of discover what was really missing. And all roads kept leading me back to the Torah. And when I was like 21, I met an older gentleman who's a wise man. And he said, I know you have problems with the Torah, but I recommend you read it from just the 5 books of Moses, start from the beginning and read it without commentary and see what the book says, without all the things that people have said.
So to clarify, you were raised in yeshiva reading a Torah that had the approved commentary of the organization. You were reading the what were you reading?
It's called Mefarshim in Hebrew, but the commentaries. Okay. And again,
yes.
just to give people
integrated into the single work, maybe specified, but it's as a part of one teaching. You were raised with the teaching and the interpretations.
Correct. And the way they frame the Torah is the Torah includes the Tanakh, which is the entire Old Testament, and the Mishnah. and the Midrash and the Zohar and the Talmud and
That's a
the
big job.
Babylonian
Wow.
Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud and all of the halacha and all of the mysticism that was written by rabbis for thousands of years. Somehow that's all the Torah, right? That's all the word of God. And, there's varying levels of which rabbi they hold in high regard, but ultimately people that are Orthodox just bend the knee to the rabbi, and that's part and parcel of their religion. And that religion is not
They're taught
reflective.
that. That's the
Yeah,
structure.
yeah,
That's
and
that's the way.
absolutely. And it is not reflective of the Torah itself. And that's what I started to realize rereading the Torah in my adulthood without commentary was, wow, this is a comprehensive standalone work. And the fact that there have been so many numerous books piled on top of this and so many voices, like a cacophony of
Lends the credence to
chaos.
the point of what you said. The fact that there's 15,000 books written about those five it proves by default that there's something there, obviously, regardless of your opinions of anything.
Yeah, exactly. And then it just becomes a question of, am I bound to other people's interpretations, or are we all given the right and the privilege and actually the obligation to read the Torah ourselves and to speak of it and to come to the conclusions that the text provides, as opposed to referencing external sources that bring down ideas and laws that are nowhere to be found in the original Torah, when the original Torah literally says, do not add or subtract to these commandments. And actually, just sorry to finish, the chapter, Deuteronomy chapter 13, talks about a false prophet. And the first verse in chapter 13 is, you shall not add or subtract to these commandments. And then it proceeds to talk about false prophets and people who are telling us to deviate from what we already know God is, and we already know what God says in the original revelation. And that's why I think that, to reference the monotheistic faiths, they're all stemming to Genesis. They all go back. That is the beginning. The beginning marks the beginning of all the monotheistic religions. So, I believe in the foundation. I don't believe in all of the books and the things that came after that. And I think there has been a lot of malpractice in religion and a lot of sinister corruption that is godless.
In human nature. In human nature, that transcends. It doesn't just transcend one specific religion. It is common through all structures of belief and control through belief and belief and control. Since the beginning. It is something inside of us in the form of mankind that nothing seems to be able to cleanse itself out. For Exodus 12:38, right? Like, as far as Erev Rav is concerned, like it's in the beginning of everything, like the subject matter. And it seems that we as a collective keep falling for it. I mean, it's funny when you listen to British people talking about democracy and the current situation. You're like, you guys still have a king. You have a king. But the king doesn't. It's more of a symbol. Yes, that's my point. The king is a symbol of subservience to all others who are not the king, and then who are not next to the king, right? And it's funny because when you look at all prophets, messengers, messianic figures of any kind, like they weren't calling Moses the Mashiach, but clearly he was in that role. That role wasn't even defined in his actual life when he was breathing and actually taking the actions. But it's funny. I was thinking about what you just said, because if you look at the first 5 books, which are the ones that would be considered the holy book, right? Those are the holy books, right? And if you say something like the Mishnah or you say the Talmud, well, someone could say, is the Talmud sacred or holy? And then most people say holy. But if it's holy, that would mean it comes directly from the creator, directly to the prophet, thus the 5 books. So how could it? So you hold the Talmud spiritually to the same as the Torah, and then they would have to say no, but they would have to say no. No, but they do. But they would have.
That's what's crazy. They even make a false historical claim that has no evidence and actually makes no sense. Is that somehow the oral tradition of the Talmud and the rabbis originates from Sinai, right? Of course, they have no evidence for that, and it's an absurd claim to say that conversations and arguments of rabbis written down 1,500 years after Sinai is somehow from Sinai. It's insane.
Yeah.
But they don't pride themselves in being rational or reasonable or truthful. They pride themselves in being cultish, and like you said, that is a nature of humanity in general that you find even with secular governments, right? Secular, even when they
Yes, it's
eliminate
not even
religion,
about one religion.
it's a
It's
matter
about
of
something
control.
inside of us.
Mhm. Yeah, but to
Yes,
reference the king in the Torah, the king is told not to have too much money, not to have too much gold, not to have too many women. He has to write a copy of the Torah and read it all the time so that his heart shall not be arrogant over his brothers, right? And
sure.
that's God's vision for leadership is always one of people in leadership positions need to be extremely humble, not corrupted, not want money and greed and power. They need to be men of truth who serve God. And that's Moses' crowning glory. He's referred to as the servant of God. And because of that, he's actually a trustworthy man. When it comes to the external books of the rabbis,
Trustworthy enough that 5.5 billion of the nearly 9 billion people, or nearly 8 billion people on Earth, all look at Moses as a superior figure on some aspect, meaning prophet, like a minimum of a prophet, because he brings the foundation of the what would be the Abrahamic faiths.
and
So
by all accounts, he's actually the greatest of them all. There is no other prophet in all of the Abrahamic religions, and I believe any other religions, who are recorded to have spoken and communicated directly with Yahweh, with God Himself, over.
Abraham, Avram.
Correct, but Abraham that's absolutely correct. But I'm saying in terms of like a prophet who's leading the people and providing a law book and a basis of
Oh, on the
revelation, right?
scale.
Yeah, and in terms of
Yeah, but I look
revelation,
at well, the story has to start at the beginning, and one could say that Avram to Abraham's journey of becoming could have been even harder because he didn't have anyone else to distract him, or but
yeah,
then at the same time, and one what there would be no number two without the number one, etc. So
absolutely.
I follow the train of the story,
I
like
agree. No,
for me
Abraham is absolutely the original. He's the patriarch.
yeah,
He's
like
an unbelievable.
my just to be so the audience knows, this is our first conversation together, correct?
Yeah,
We had a couple messages on Instagram, a couple messages for schedule on WhatsApp, and then we're here. That
correct.
right?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. But I have a lot of these conversations, and this is the premise beginning to the debate platforms of various subjects. But I wanted to always get into like the spiritual components without the perspective of the need to defend. Like for me, to be transparent, if I'm looking at a covenant, and that covenant went from God in the form of El Shaddai to a man named Avram, who became Abraham when the covenant was created, and to he who his seeds would be great nations. That is the covenant, right? And so when I look at that, I see obviously he had Ishmael, then he had Isaac, and the first covenant of this was clearly established through Isaac and then through Jacob, of course.
Hmm.
But as we see where with Ishmael, when he was turned away by, when he left, when he was turned away from his father and his stepmother, so to speak, several times Ishmael means God hears.
God shall hear. Yeah.
And several times in the journey, he was spoken to by angels saying, "Don't worry." And his mother was told, "He will
Hmm.
have a great nation." This is just a moment in time, so to speak. And so I don't think there's any irony when you
Yeah.
follow down several generations that a man from the area named Muhammad, and by the way, peace be upon everybody, okay, period. Uh, we all come from one source. That he would then get a covenant and a commandment going off of the other that is specializing on that with the exact same prophet lineage and reverence of everything. Also, um, you know, fulfilling the prophecies in Hosea and others, God is not a man, etc. Right, which is going against a massive orthodoxy at the time, because we're talking about Muhammad was 600, 580 to 633 A.D. The ecumenical, we're on the fourth ecumenical council in Roman Catholic history from 325. They've already been well established as a nationalized religion for, at this time, 300 years, right?
Right.
So to go against and say, actually, God is not a man, for
Yeah. They were
example,
already
is
worshiping Jesus as God at that
it's a
point,
death
right?
certificate
Yeah.
in a lot of those regions already, because there
Hmm.
were a lot of Christian regions at that time, like
Yeah.
Christian empires nearby, right? It wasn't just all white Europe, ladies and gentlemen. And so, I look at that and I say, okay, and then Muhammad has the covenant, fulfilling that his forefather in Ishmael, and thus the Abrahamic covenant from Abram to Abraham, the father of great nations. And then the interesting part is that after his wife Sarai dies, he either,
Marries again.
Jewish, you think he marries Hagar again, but
That's
some others say
bullshit.
is something different, and has six
Keturah.
more,
Yeah.
has Keturah, and has six more sons. And so where
Yeah.
are they? Because we know where two are. And to me, from my worldview perspective, if I lend any credence to one, it is divided between all, because that's what the words mean. I don't understand why I'm supposed to recognize one and denounce the other, because it's like saying that there's a poison part of the pool. You say this part of this pool is holy water and over there's dirty water, but it's one pool. The water is moving.
100%.
It doesn't make any sense.
Just to your point, I'm sure you know. Are you Jewish, by the way?
No.
Okay. So, but it's well known even in beyond the Jewish community that the Jews do disparage like non-Jews, and that was one of the things that I hated about growing up Orthodox, is the disparagement of non-Jews. Whereas, like, again, the demonization of Ishmael, when in the Torah itself, Ishmael has questionable character, but God clearly cares about him a lot, and he's Abraham's son, and he's blessed.
Yeah.
Even Esau, who's the twin brother of Jacob, they paint him as like the devil incarnate, but Esau himself never actually killed Jacob. He actually forgave Jacob.
Yeah.
And,
he did forgive him.
Yeah. And so, we're talking about people that are not all that bad, who for propaganda purposes are painted as being, irredeemable. But even something you said about the heir of Rav, I want to push back on, because the heir of Rav is said in Exodus that the Jewish people left Egypt with a mixed multitude. And there's no indication that mixed multitude was a bad thing. It's actually a product of Jewish tradition, where they blame every evil on the mixed multitude. And so they say that it was the mixed multitude that caused the golden calf, and it was the mixed multitude that complained about the manna, and it was the mixed multitude that complained about not entering the land, right? And they're completely getting rid of their own responsibility and accountability by saying, no, it was the mixed multitude of, Egyptians or whatever other people that came up with us. But the reality is, converts, and the Hebrew word for convert is ger, which means a sojourner, someone who lives amongst the Jewish people and is under biblical law. We are told to have one law for the native and the convert, and to love the convert additionally. Because we ourselves were strangers in Egypt, and we're told to love them and provide for them, and even give them like parts of our field and all of these things. And so this idea that Judaism is this elitist mentality that doesn't give room to other people is a horrible thing, and that's not part and parcel of the Torah itself. The one thing I will say, though, is that with regards to, say, Christianity or Islam or even Judaism, like books that come after the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, I'm not saying that they hold no validity whatsoever, but they need to be measured up to the original document. And in the sense that they deviate from the original document, they're invalid. At least that statement is invalid, right? Like if some people want to interpret this Quran verse metaphorically, but if you take it literally, which I believe Muslims take it literally, right? You should cut off a thief's hand, for example, right? That's in the Quran. But in the Torah,
my family is Pashtun Afghan, and we have a code of ethics called Pashtu Ali, which is the 10 laws of Moses. And 2 people charged with adultery, they kill them both. Someone steals, cut their hand off.
But so just to make a distinction there, adultery in the Torah is a married woman. So men are allowed to have more than one wife. But a married woman who sleeps with another man, both those adulterer and adulteress are put to death under the Torah's laws. However, for stealing,
they both have to be married. Yes.
No, the woman has to be married. So the way it works, adultery in the Torah is only for a married woman. Right, a married man is allowed to be with other women.
That's a good question. I'm curious to know. It's probably, as you say, probably they would never kill a man for sleeping with another woman in Afghanistan,
unless she was married.
Oh, okay, that's what I mean. Yeah. If they were both married, they both die. Yes,
but that's the thing. Only if she's married. Even if he's married, that's fine, because men are allowed to sleep with more than one woman.
Yeah, but if she's married and he's married, they both die.
But even if he was unmarried, let's say I'm a single man. God forbid, if I were to sleep with a married woman, we would both be put to death. Right? Even though I'm unmarried, but it's because she's married.
Okay. I'm interested to know that with Pashtu Ali. But the code of ethics from the Pashtun code of ethics, Pashtu Ali, dictates exactly what you're describing as those original biblical laws
But
of
with
Moses.
regards to
That's
the
where they
cutting
come
off the
from.
hand, that's not the law of Moses. That's what I'm trying to make that distinction. In the law of Moses, a thief has to pay double. There is no hand cutting off. You get your
And
hand
if they
cut off
can't,
if you cut off someone else's hand, right? If I cut off someone
huh,
else's hand, I get my hand cut off. If I steal, I have to pay double. If you can't pay, you get sold as a slave.
yeah, or
That's the
get your hand
law.
cut off.
No, that's not the law. That's my
No
point. Is that
options. Just sold as a slave, direct.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I,
Slavery always seems to solve things in this story of
well,
humanity.
look, I
It's
mean,
interesting how that
don't
works.
steal. You know, like one of the things I always tell people when they get so like bent out of shape over the harshness of the biblical punishments is like if you don't commit these evils, you won't get those punishments. You know, and so it's like
Oh,
you know,
I'm for biblical punish. No, I'm
yeah,
for biblical punishments. I think that
mm-hmm,
when someone is proven without a shadow of doubt to
mm-hmm,
have harmed innocence in the form of a child for
mm-hmm.
anything that has like sexual, any beating, stealing, robbing, kidnapping, they should have their member cut off, branded on the forehead, and then put in a trunk or something for at least 3 days, and then released or killed. Like I'm for biblical
Well, okay. I
deterrence.
mean, I suppose that is more. That's not a biblical deterrent. Like
Well,
that's
that's
not.
my biblical interpret. Well, we need a little more aggressive today. Actually, the funny part is
Okay.
we're more screwed up now than they were then.
In some sense, yeah. I mean, it seems like the immoralities of humanity have been going on for a very long time. But yeah, where we live now, they actually openly celebrate sin, and immorality is not even acknowledged as being a problem.
Sodom and
Uh,
Gomorrah.
yeah, no, it's horrific,
Yeah.
and by the way, that should make any religious person uh, afraid. Is that we're not living in a time of peace. We're not living in a time of prosperity. Although in some ways we are, but at the same time we're always teetering on the edge of a cliff. And like as Jews just need to look at the state of Israel as an example of the chaos that goes on when God is not in our midst and we're not making it a priority to serve Him.
I would say God not in the midst by choice.
By
It's not
choice,
like,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
by distinct exercise of free will.
Hmm.
The idea and the notion that everyone keeps pointing at, oh, the reason this is because of them, and the reason this is because of that. The reason nothing because of that. It's decisions and free will. I mean, you
Yeah,
had
it's
look.
you.
I don't have a problem with gay people. And as I said, I'm not Jewish, and I don't consider myself Jewish or Muslim. I'm definitely not a Christian. For sure, I don't believe in human gods. I'm not a pagan. I don't do false idolatry. Actually, it's
Hmm.
probably to the extent that the reason why, according to modern Jews today, that I couldn't be Jewish is based off of Maimonides' 12 principles of Judaism, which is not in the Torah.
Not at
Number
all.
12 is you have to believe in the coming Mashiach.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sorry, I don't
absolutely not.
believe in any human savior at all.
Yeah. Well, look,
I believe
Maimonides, we can talk about him because he definitely breached his authority terribly. I mean, this man, although he was a very, effective scholar and doctor, apparently,
without question, yeah,
ultimately what he did
is wise.
was, what he did was codify the Talmud into mainstream Jewish law and made his own philosophy, the
Hmm.
Torah philosophy. And I've read his philosophy book. And again, he's what he did is unacceptable. Making those 12 principles of faith, that's not in the Torah. The Torah does not
Yeah,
make the
that's
messianic.
13.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Torah does
12.
not make.
Number 12 is the belief in the Mashiach and the coming Mashiach.
Yes, and
And I'm
the
like,
resurrection
oh,
of the
isn't
dead.
that?
Yeah. Mm.
But Rabbi, think about this. My favorite word for the personification of evil today is the word Erev Rav, and I will get into the Erev Rav because evil exists, and I think it was like and maybe I'm polluted by Maimonides' teachings on the Erev Rav, and maybe I'm
Probably.
polluted. Maybe the teachings of Rabbi Yochai mentioning the Erev Rav over 258 times in the Zohar has influenced
Yeah.
me.
It's just a
But I think
scapegoat.
that yeah, but if I think that but evil exists though, and I feel
Sure.
like part of the reasons I think
But
that
evil is within
all
you, right?
Of course. And I spent years living in the jungle, drinking ayahuasca, eradicating the evil within me. And I spent a decade serving that medicine to the souls of the world to help them too. And I still have to check myself every day. We can't escape it, just like we can't escape our shadow. And following the fall of the sun will be the rising of the moon. These are inevitabilities, right? And so, similar to a Zoroastrian understanding, we have to take it amongst ourselves. So when we realize, as Zarathustra said, he said, all we have is the control over three things. One is our thoughts, second is our words, and the third is our deeds. And as long as we can keep our thoughts righteous, our words righteous, and our actions righteous, then we move closer to the true light and away from the darkness. It couldn't have been explained any easier than this. And I find myself, but at the same time, I don't tempt myself. Guess what I don't do? I've never eaten pork. I don't drink alcohol. I don't do drugs. I don't go to things that would make me be tempted. I don't gamble. I don't do anything that would tempt me to have the moral impasse to decide and to convince myself if something's good or bad, right?
Well,
it's like someone's fat, right? You say, okay, I want to lose weight. Alcoholics say, I'm going to stop drinking when they're drinking, right? No. If you want to stop losing weight, you don't talk about it while you're eating pizza. To lose fat, you don't start losing fat. You stop getting fat. First, step one, stop getting fat. Step two, then start losing weight, right? We have a weird way. You were saying?
Correct. No, well, I think to this point of the individual's accountability for their own actions, their own words, their own deeds, the messianic narrative is so destructive, and I actually hate it. If you understand, the messianic story is wait. First mistake, don't wait. Second, for someone else to do your job for you.
Wait,
right? Wait
and
for
pray.
Someone else to do your job for you. Right? It's like the worst advice you can give. Like, imagine you tell a young child, you don't have to do anything.
You just said it right there.
Just wait.
You just
framed it perfect. Will do it for you.
Rabbi, you just said it right there. You said, wait for someone else to do your job for you.
It's horrible.
Exactly.
It's about the worst thing you could tell someone. I think the messianic neurosis, and really the Jews started it. The only reason why Christianity adopted it was because it was a Jewish story of a Jew named Jesus with Jewish disciples who were all attached to this messianic dream, which was existing in Israel prior to that with Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba. Rabbi Akiva, who's this original amazing. The Talmud says Rabbi Akiva was greater than Moses. But like we can just talk about Rabbi Akiva's life. He left his wife.
Who wrote that part of the Talmud? Who wrote the part of the Talmud? Him?
I don't know. That? Maybe he wrote it or his students.
His disciple wrote it.
But they said he's greater than Moses because he has a way to explain every crown on each letter of the Torah. There's absurdities like that. But I mean, we can just talk about his life story. It was not a very good one. He left his wife for 24 years to become a great Talmudic scholar. He amassed 24,000 students, and they all died. And then he had his flesh combed off by the Romans till he died. So pretty bad story, however you cut it.
Yeah.
And Moses, on the other hand, is crowned with glory and is given 120 years of long, vigorous life, and is in the house of God and is beloved and cherished by God. So clearly you can see the difference. And the fact that Orthodox Jews would put Rabbi Akiva in higher esteem than Moses explains how they could have such destructive ideas to begin with. But Rabbi Akiva had a Messiah of his own named Bar Kokhba, who was this warrior Jew in Israel, and he believed, he's the Messiah, right? And then, of course, he wasn't the Messiah. And so you look at Jewish history, there's been like hundreds of fake messiahs, and Shabtai Tzvi is another example of this guy in
I
Europe.
wanted to get into that.
A couple hundred years ago, a complete lunatic.
Jacob Frank.
There's so many. And in the time of Shabtai Tzvi, Jews were literally selling their homes in Europe to get ready to go to Israel on like the wings of an eagle or something. And it's like
he really
this delusion, even Rashi, who's really just such a horrible commentator. He comments on every verse in the Bible and even the whole Talmud. Rashi in the Talmud says that the third temple is going to fall out of the sky, right? And so that just means don't even try to rebuild. It's gonna fall out of the sky. It's like, what are you talking about? We literally sit here building skyscrapers and Singapore and buildings. You don't think we can build a temple if we really wanted to? But again, it's this idea that just wait for it all to happen for you, and there's no active role that you have to play in this. And again, it's just the most destructive narrative that you could feed people. Or again, like someone
What?
else will die for your sins.
Yeah, and one thing I want to get into, so we don't forget, and we can remind each other, is I want to talk about that specific thing, the concept of Israel from the perspective of um, a book, a people, and a land, right? The spiritual concept of it, and then what we're watching today,
Mm-hmm.
which are clearly two different situations, right? And it doesn't mean anything other than what it is. You know what I mean? Like if you go and say we can talk about anything, right? That's why this podcast is called Free Thought Unchained, because we talk whatever we want. I mean, I've been on I had an interview 2 weeks ago with a Hebrew Israelite who was telling me that all white people are going to become slaves, and he was calling me a Heshemite or something, and I was like, I'm not even Arab, but it doesn't matter.
Well, look, I've heard such
And
crazy things from Jews that they believe all non-Jews will be slaves. Like all this stuff is just like, like these ideas, again, the messianic stuff, and there are like vague references in the prophets about this, and it's for that reason I don't follow the Old Testament as a religion. Like I appreciate a lot of the books in the Old Testament, but the Torah is only the first 5 books. And that needs to be very clear to people. Is that when it comes
go
to
into that. That's actually what you're describing is a very, very, very important part, and there is a very big distinction between the 5 books of Moses, the other canonized, so to speak, because we're using English, and then everything else.
Yeah, everything else, look, is either history, and the history part is quite informative. I would encourage people to read it. It's found in the first books of the Old Testament after the 5 books of Moses. So Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. That's all history, and that's very useful information. Once you get past that, you're looking at prophecy, and the thing about prophecy is that these prophets are not prophets like Moses. Moses is directly communicating with God. He's writing down laws, things that we need to follow. Even God says in Numbers, when Aaron and Miriam, the brother and sister of Moses, speak against him, they're like, we're also prophets. Why is Moses so holy, right? God says, how dare you speak against my servant Moses? He's not like other prophets. Other prophets, they're spoken to in a dream, in a vision, in a riddle, but Moses sees the picture of God clearly, and he's welcome in the home of God. And how, like, this is a different level, man. He's speaking mouth to mouth, face to face, this direct communication that's unprecedented. And every great king and prophet worth their salt in the Old Testament is always pointing back to Moses. You see that with Joshua, you see that with David on his deathbed, told that to Solomon, follow the Torah of Moses. As far as Ezra, who's the last book in the Old Testament, Ezra, his method of bringing the Jews back to the Torah was to get up and read the Torah of Moses. And he was considered great because he knew the Torah of Moses. That's always been the standard for the Jewish people. I saw Mendel asked a question about rediscovering the book of Deuteronomy. He may be referring to this story of Josiah. And in fact, the story of Josiah is not just the book of Deuteronomy. That's a false rabbinic interpretation. What it says in the book of Kings is that he found the Torah. He found the whole Torah. And the Torah was actually missing from amongst Israel. So like imagine the king of Israel, the descendant of David, didn't even know the Torah existed. And he found it in the archive of the temple. And when he read it, he ripped his clothing and started mourning and said, this is our faith. How could we have lost it? And so the Torah has always been the 5 books of Moses, and this attempt to make it anything other than that is what causes the breakdown of the Torah, so that you have a guy like Maimonides being like, oh, look, there's a verse in Isaiah that says your dead shall come alive. So therefore, now if you don't believe in the great resurrection on the day of the Messiah, now you're not a Jew, you're a heretic. It's like, this is complete nonsense. Don't base your life and your belief off of a vague verse in a prophet. The prophets speak largely metaphorically and in riddles. And so, there is wisdom to be found there, but don't take it as, the direct binding word of God as the Torah is. The Torah is explicitly the law, and that needs to be followed without adding or subtracting.
It's interesting too, because I'm pretty sure that the covenant, right, as far as like the 613 mitzvot, is based around the 5 books.
That's where there's
right?
no law
All
outside of the 5 books.
613 comes directly from the 5 books.
Yeah.
And of those 5 books, 2 of them are books of law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
2 of the 3 are books of law.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the point of anything else?
Yeah, well, ironically, the 613 thing, I'm not sure is an accurate number. I've seen the rabbinic countings, and they usually include some rabbinic commandments in the 613.
Oh, there's extra ones?
Yeah. Like they'll include their own.
We need to find out.
Yeah, so I don't really use the 613 thing because I've never counted it, and frankly, it's not that important, the number, because it's ultimately you just got to know the commandments. But yeah, I mean, you have a couple commandments in Genesis, like God saying, "Be fruitful and multiply." You have circumcision with Abraham, and then you have this kind of small commandment of not eating the hip sinew, where Jacob gets struck when he's wrestling the angel man.
We're at the sciatica.
And by the way, as you mentioned, that's where Israel is established in that wrestling.
He who struggles.
He who struggles with God. And that's definitely a spiritual concept.
Which could be interpreted as battles.
Battles, striving, struggling. The word comes from Sarah, like the same name as Sarah, which means like officers are called sarim, so it's like this attempt to strive for greatness and struggle through struggling with God, and it's a brilliant thing. You could say that is a spiritual. That's a spiritual Israel that goes even beyond just the people. I think that's why that she struggled. Sarah did, sure.
You could say that she struggled because she wanted to, in essence, materialize the prophecy faster. That's why she said, "Hey, go procreate with Hagar, right? So we can get this kingdom moving."
Yeah.
Right. That which in essence would mean by default there's a lack of faith. But then the antithesis of that would say, well, she didn't really have the revelation directly herself, so you can't really. It's not like It's not like
but also she was that was prior to God even telling them about Isaac, right? Like she gave Hagar to Abraham before God ever told even Abraham about Isaac, right? So I don't think it was a lack of faith. I think it was a very.
Ishmael was already born.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was a very noble thing that she did.
The angel told Sarah after Ishmael was already born that she would give birth.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's why. So I don't think it was a lack of faith at all. I think it was very noble, and I think women nowadays can learn from her, where women, often are greedy.
I personally don't have a criticism for her. Those were the times. I mean, listen, my grandfather had 3 wives and 19 children. My grandfather, not 1,000 years ago, my ancestor. My father's father.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, as I said, they're also living in a place where still something of value, of significant value can't pay. You're going to get the hand cut off like that.
But look, I mean, I don't think that this modernity. Yeah, but look, I mean, this call for modernity. I'd say there, like the benefits of modernity, as far as I can see, is running water. Like that seems to be the greatest advent of humanity. Like I don't really celebrate the great progress as they claim has happened. Because there's been a lot of regression too, and it's probably necessary. But ultimately, when everything breaks down and everything's now moral relativism, and we don't know what's truth. We do need to return to a foundation that's trustworthy. And that's what I found myself struggling with, is that when I rejected the orthodoxy, I just rejected everything. I threw the baby out with the bathwater, and I was bereft of any guidance, of any truth in the world. And being able to find that in the Torah was extremely liberating for me, because it made me realize that the foundation of my faith was still intact. It was just the corruption surrounding it that was wrong. And that's the truth for Christians, Muslims, Jews. It's the foundation is
strong. The building is strong. The pollution inside of the so to speak, the pollution and the confusion inside can make you feel like the whole place. But once you escape the environment for a little bit and in return, you realize actually the foundation is perfect. The structure is perfect, and any confusion, any experiences we had where it appeared and felt like it was blood-stained walls or whatever, when you come back and return with the clear eyes and get a little fresh air, you realize it was perfectly fine. Actually,
I think that's beautiful, and I think that's the message of the Torah to begin with, is that when God creates the earth on the sixth day, he completes his creation and says everything's very good. Right? Like, do we trust that? Because how many people look at life and think it's very bad, think it's unjust, think
Yeah.
everything's wrong, right? And it's like, but if you saw God's vision, you'd see that everything God did was very good. And so the things that we're struggling with are actually the result of our own wrongdoing. And that's explicit in the Torah. God makes it very clear there is reward and punishment. And that is, it doesn't mean that we are able to judge exactly why things happen. But the point is that on a large scale, the way the world operates is that when human beings are following God, we live in Eden. And when we disobey God, we're expelled from Eden. We're cursed to work in sorrow. We're cursed with death and sickness and suffering and exile and all these things. And that's echoed with the children of Israel, where God is almost giving this nation like another chance. If you look at the way God is describing Israel, what Israel could be, the land flowing with milk and honey, where the rains are in the proper. Yeah, so what's supposed to be, right?
Supposed to be, right?
Yeah, and it's like this vision, almost like Eden, where it's the days of heaven on earth. It literally says this in Deuteronomy. It's like the days of heaven on earth. You have many children, you have many crops, you have abundance, you have peace, you have wealth, you have health, like literally like promises of health, to the point of you won't have miscarriage, you won't have early death, you won't have any plagues or anything, almost utopian.
Blessed.
But
blessed,
yeah, blessed, exactly.
Yeah,
Blessed,
blessed.
not cursed, alive and not
Yeah.
dead, healthy, not sick. That exists in a world where we follow God. And God makes it very clear that all of the suffering that you will experience is going to be the result of your inaction, of your not following God, not following his commandments, worshiping other gods. And I think that the Jews need to take that very seriously, because our history suggests that we've been doing some things wrong.
And so from your worldview, like from your perspective, that is a distinct covenant with the Hebrew, with the Hebrew people and with God, right? Like, meaning that they have a specific covenant. Whereas for example, there are people who are raised in whatever religion, right? And they can, like, there's plenty of people that are never raised it with Judaism or any of these religions, right? They have a desire to get a good job, and then eventually start a company. They marry their high school sweetheart, and then they have 3 kids, and they're happy, and they live lives and procreate, right? You're saying specifically there is a distinct covenant with the God of Israel, right? And the people, right? You're saying there's a distinct relationship.
There is obviously a distinct relationship.
Reap a benefit better than and get punished worse is like a.
Well, look, I mean, I could just tell you the verse in Exodus. God says, "I have taken you to me to be a kingship of priests and a holy nation." Right? In other words, there is a distinct relationship that God wants to have with the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but it's not to the exclusion of other people. In fact, again, that's why converts are accepted. And there's even a term in Deuteronomy, those who can enter the congregation of Yahweh. And that's why it's not the God of Israel is God himself, as the God of the universe. You may find this interesting, that the Hebrew word for Yahweh, Yehovah, the root word of Yehovah is Hoveh. Hoveh means the present, right? So Haya is the past, Yehiyah is the future, Hoveh is the present.
Yeah.
And the name of God in the Torah, by like a long shot, is Yahweh, which means God is calling us to engage with him in the present moment. The existence of God is here and now, and that's not something that's disconnected from any individual. Noah exists long before there's a Torah or there's even a Jewish people. Right? But Noah is a righteous man.
That. Yeah.
By the way, a fully realized man. Unbelievable what Noah accomplished. And by the way, you have the rabbis trying to badmouth Noah in their commentaries, and it's despicable. Noah is a righteous man.
One of my favorite, when we look at the word Yahweh, and we look at it in its pure form as the Tetragrammaton Yuv He Vav He, my favorite understanding of that is the Yuv and the Vav is the masculine, the He or the Shekhinah is put in between. So it's the balance between the create, like the material and the essence. And when you combine those together, you have the one, right? You have the unified
the one God
essence. Well, you have in the beginning they say there was the word, right? Okay,
well, but the Christians say that.
Well, either in the beginning there God created man and breathed life through the nostril.
Yeah, because the Christians say in the beginning was the word, but the Torah says in the beginning God.
Yes, but then God, and then yeah, of course, in the
And
beginning,
God
God for sure.
created with his word, right? So the word is not God. God's
Yeah,
word created.
I'm interviewing lots of people from different variations, so I get it. Some of these cross sometimes.
Yeah.
In the beginning, there was God, the Arabic la ilah illallah, right? The beginning, right?
Mhm.
And then there was the direction to create. Why? You're thinking human. Why? I wonder. You can wonder. There was creation, right? And then the creation required the vibration of creation, right? But that word, we're still inside of that word. That word has not. That's the eternal vibrate. That's the eternal creation of which we're still inside of.
And it's
And
very
that
good.
essence. Say it again.
And it's very good. It's God's creation. It's very good.
Yes, but inside of that creation is also the contrast, which would be the dark, right? But then within like the dark, in my book, I have a poem talking about the darkness is the canvas from which light can even be painted upon.
Yeah,
Without
well,
without the darkness, there wouldn't be the ability to even conceive of light.
well, the story of creation begins with the earth being desolate, chaotic, and dark upon the face of the deep. So you definitely be correct in saying that there's this default state of darkness and chaos, and God comes to create light and life
Order,
and order. Yeah,
the
and it's
order and the
yeah,
chaos.
yeah, and it's brilliant. And by the way, to the point of the darkness and the evil and the sin, there's a verse in Isaiah that says, God formed light and created darkness, makes peace, and he created evil, right? So in other words, God creates everything and does everything, right? and
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the point is though is that in Genesis, in the story of Cain and Abel, God tells Cain a very interesting thing, which is, surely if you improve yourself, you will be uplifted. But if you do not, sin crouches at the door and its desires towards you, yet you shall rule over it. And so what I'm seeing there is that this sin, right? Because sin is like this force in existence that has this craving towards us and kind of drags us in at any entrance that it gets, any opening it gets, to throw us off the mark and to make us do the wrong thing. God is telling us we can rule over sin, right? God is telling us we can stomp the head of the snake. God is telling us we could do the right thing even though it's hard and even though there's opposition. And so I
yeah.
think that that's the hope for us, and it's really lets us know that we have no excuse to just be like, oh, it's impossible. No, it's not impossible.
Well, aren't we the only ones? Aren't we the only creation that has true free will? I mean, regardless of what perspective of angels, angels don't have free will. The angels of light are doing the light, and somehow the angels of dark, so to speak, are doing the, and everything is just standing in its own light.
Yeah, it's an interesting point.
It
I've had
seems.
that conversation before. Truthfully, I don't know how angels work. I don't know like what an angel's journey looks like exactly. Maybe there is choice. I
Yeah.
don't know. I really don't know, to be honest. I don't think
What
anyone
questions?
really knows.
You,
But
you, yeah, you mean the angelic? You're talking about like
I'm
from
just saying,
like the
I
chair,
could.
like
Well, yeah, I could conceive of a world in which an angel has choice like a human does, right? Like an
wait,
angel
in
doesn't
Islam they have
necessitate.
one.
Yeah, who's that?
In Islam, there was a jinn. In Islam, there's a jinn, means like spirit, called Mendel. Pull it up. Jinn with free will, who later became what we would refer to now as like a Satan, as a
Well, yeah, I
Satan.
mean, I know you have that in the New Testament. Lucifer rebels against God, but
No,
even
but
in
yeah,
the
Lucifer is no, but
yeah,
Lucifer is a mistranslation from Isaiah 14:12. It's when Isaiah is speaking to the king of Babylon, and he says, "Oh, look at you, great king! How you shine in the light, only to be shine in the night, only to have your light fall with the rising of the inevitable sun." And the word in
interesting.
Hebrew for the word in Hebrew was translated into the Greek, and then the Greek version was translated into Latin for the New Testament, which was
Morning star.
Lucifer,
Yeah.
and then it became personified because they're pagans. Romans
Well,
were
look, yeah, I mean, the Romans were pagans. Explains why they made the Sabbath on Sunday for the sun god.
yeah,
Um, you know,
of course.
even though they claim it's for the resurrection day, but either
No,
way,
because they were from
there's never a good excuse to change the Sabbath day.
no, but they didn't though, according to them, because the elites of Rome for a long period of time, basically from around the time. Okay, the Alexander the Great, one thing that he uncovered when he conquered Persia for the extent that they did was the Persian ancient belief systems and understandings, of which the cult of Mithras was one of the big ones. that became like the thriving religion in the elites of Rome at the time of Julius Caesar. So by the time of Constantine, this is like well established as if understandings. So they just converted the Sunday of Mithra to the Sunday of Jesus's resurrection.
Yeah.
And even if, let's just say, you want to believe the stories of Jesus, it's perfectly fine. But just understand why it was canonized the way it
Where
was.
it actually comes
and it has
from.
nothing to do with that. That's all I'm trying to say. You could, if you want to believe that the guy died and resurrected, etc., feel free. Understand that the only reason they accepted that is because it falls in line with their existing calendar and their worship periods, which is based on seasons and stars.
Evidence just from the New Testament, that they're borrowing freely from the Old Testament and from Greek Roman culture to create some sort of narrative.
Well, I can tell you why. Paul in around 49 AD was when Paul was in Greece and then in Rome. And right around those times, Paul's writings were directly in alignment with the Greek mythologies of the time. And Paul never met Jesus. Paul says he has a vision. Paul was allegedly a Jewish rabbi, but he was more of the what is the type of rabbi, the type of Judaism starts with the M, that's super mystical, believes in like bitheism. They put a lot of energy into, like, for example, they recognize at the time, especially it's called bitheism. They basically, the concept of the constriction, the simsum, like the constriction, like from the firmament cracking open with El Elyon, and then the various Elohim breaking through as a constriction. That's why they all have El inside of their names. And so, like, for example, these what are they called? Mendel, you pulling this up, or should I try to? It's a specific type of Jewish path that was very popular at the time of Jesus. When Jesus was already walking around, there were whole scores of rabbis practicing this type of Judaism, of which, and by the way, it was focused in Turkey, which is where this guy Paul is from, who never met Jesus, but somehow 17 of the books, half of the book is written by him. The guy has a vision walking down the street allegedly, and then 50% of what you've been taught is the truth of God is written by this guy.
Exactly. No, and the same way that the Orthodox Jews hold the Talmud to be the Word of God, the Christians hold the New Testament to be the Word of God.
That's where I'm going with it. No, that's my point. And so then the question is Paul held to be like, and they're like, yes, he's actually a saint. I'm like, okay, so the guy's a saint. So what does that mean, he's a saint? Which means a bunch of people at some point said he's a saint, which means that what he said is more important than someone else because we said he's a saint. What does it say?
People appointing people.
Thinking in my head, I'm stuck with Mizrahi, and it's not Mizrahi. It's
Mithraism. Merkava.
Yeah. No. Mithraism, I already explained. Paul.
Merkava?
Yes.
Merkava.
Yes.
Yeah.
Merkava
is the
Judaism.
Yeah, Merkava is the religion the revelation described to Ezekiel, where he sees these heavenly chariots and angelic beings with foreheads and all this stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
But again, like, why are you making a religion based off of that? It's like encountering an alien,
That's what he said. He said that he had a vision where Jesus appeared when the skies opened up. And but when the Merkava Jew at the time, there were whole sects of these Jews all over, and a lot in Turkey. And they were working with different medicines and doing different drugs or whatever you want to say. But there were a bunch of these like sects there at the time of Jesus that were practicing this form of Judaism. And apparently Paul was from this. And so when Paul had his vision, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Irrelevant, because he was persecuting Christians before.
Yeah, but remember, I mean, in Christianity, you have them changing the Sabbath to Sunday. You have them saying, Paul says circumcision is meaningless. He literally says circumcision avails nothing, right? And so again, like, you have blatant contradiction to the Torah. And that's, again, the point that I want to make. To the extent that people even want to believe in later prophets and rabbis and messiahs, those figures cannot be at odds with the Torah. And what you find increasingly with all of these figures post-Torah is that they are in conflict with the Torah. Unless we're talking about people like, the original, like Samuel, like the prophet, like he's clearly following the same tradition of Moses. But the tradition of Moses has been.
I follow your train of thought fully.
Yeah.
Fully agree with you. For example, Paul Paul, and so that's why I say there's no way Paul could be, even if Paul, let's just say, was a Jewish rabbi. Let's just say the second that he started creating his conversion, and thus not creating a religion of Jesus, because it would have been more Jewish. He created a religion about Jesus. The second that happened, in my opinion, he's no longer a rabbi and he's no longer a Jew. Because as soon as you even rise to the idea of human God and go against the entire teaching, the foundational structures, then you can't just default off of that. Like, if someone today, if you see a video of George Soros in an interview saying, "I don't believe in God, no, I don't consider myself Jewish," that's it.
I believe he's called himself God. What are we arguing about? I believe he's called himself God. Yeah.
He said, "I didn't believe in the Messiah until I realized I was." It's not a Time magazine interview. Right? Until I am. Oh yeah, he did say that. You're right. He knows what he's talking about. And he says, "Oh, they said he was helping the not like." So that's my point, though. It's like you see people like a George Soros, you see people like a Noel Yoa Harara, talking about we don't need to believe in some imaginary God in the sky. We are the gods. You in the audience control the people. Why are people trying to argue with me, defending him, say he's Jewish? I'm sorry, you're defending this literal Erev Rav.
By the way, in the Torah, a gay Israeli Jew who's an atheist.
A gay Israeli Jew with adopted children who says there's no such thing as God. You want to tell?
But remember, in the Torah, there are people like him would be put to death and excommunicated. Yeah, they'd be killed and excommunicated.
What I said, by the way, about
homosexuality, blasphemy is punishable by death. Not following the festivals, Sabbath, breaking the Sabbath is punishable by death as well. Not keeping some of the holidays or the laws will get you cut off from the people. So again, like you can be a Jew, you can be born a Jew and be cut off from the people. And I've said this, is I have more in common with a God-fearing non-Jew than with an idolatrous Jew. Like he's an idol worshiper, sinner. He's like, there's nothing Jewish about him, like other than his blood. And Judaism is clearly beyond blood. It's a covenant.
It's a covenant. That's the point. It's a spiritual covenant, and that's the problem. I think, like, you see people, and it's led for a reason, and we'll get into it in a second. But to stay on this exact subject, it's you see people in history. You see these, and for me, like maybe it comes down to good and evil, but then there's also this interesting thing that I would love to hear your opinion of. It's like, so there's Adam and there's an Eve, right? Let's just this is there's Adam and Eve, and they're created. First there's Adam and Lilith. There's not even then Eve was created after.
That's not in the Torah.
Okay.
No Lilith in the Torah.
So there's Adam and Eve, right? So there's Adam and Eve. And they're created, and they're in this blissful place, and they're told, you can eat from the tree of life, but don't eat from the tree of good and evil or wisdom, right?
No, eat from all the trees, actually.
Everything except this one, except this one. And then the question is,
just one commandment, just one.
Yeah. But here's the thing: and that commandment was given by they got it. How do we even know they knew what they were being told? Let's pretend that they knew directly from something told them this, and they knew. They understood.
Well, it says in the Torah, God told this to Adam.
Okay. But here's the thing, though. You and I are reasonable people, it seems, right? And we're alive, right? If we're outside and the heavens part, right? And God tells us something to or not to do, right? Would we ever, in the same day, break that?
It's funny you asked that question, because I think...
Ever?
Well, look, personally, my knee-jerk reaction would be no, hell no. But when you look at the Torah tells you these stories. Again, take even the Jewish people after the revelation at Sinai. They literally go worship a golden calf, right? Like they're breaking the 10 Commandments right after it was given to them by God himself. So the answer to your question is, yes, it's possible that people can literally defy God in his face, even when they're having direct communication with him. Which is why I think
isn't the description that they're in the heavens basically looking down, and then like there's a direct connection at all times? Like,
well, isn't the description
like direct?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're clearly interacting with God directly, yet that
You
still
don't
doesn't
even
stop them.
steal more Halloween candy from your parents when they're looking at you. So
Yeah.
that's my so
But
by by
again, it just lets you know the rebelliousness of human nature and the fact that
either that or they
we're not
weren't
even
told
humbled by
directly from
God.
God,
No, I
or
mean
either that or they
that's
weren't
not the
told
narrative
direct.
though. That's not the
Yeah,
narrative.
I
I
know that's
mean,
not the narrative, but I'm thinking about what I or any reasonable or logical or any normal human I've ever met in my entire life would and wouldn't do.
but
Would
you
you
have
ever
no
listen to a
reference.
snake or
You have no reference
yeah,
for that because
I
you
do have
don't.
a few thousand ayahuasca ceremonies where I've come encounter with many spirits of every kind. I don't listen to any of them. So maybe I'm a little more
Mhm.
rebellious or maybe a little more subservient. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
look, I
either
mean
one
that's
or
the
the
thing is
other.
we're told uh, that there are other gods, but we're not supposed to
Oh,
worship them,
I'm talking about
right?
spirits. Like in
And
Arabic, they use the word jinn. Like
mhm,
there's spirits of good and
yeah,
spirits of bad, right?
yeah,
And
and
those would be the angelic. Those are, and a jinn. The entire hierarchy of like of Hebrew Jewish spirits, which would be like angels. In Arabic, those are all jinn. But you could also say that in Hebrew they would all be Elohim, variations of Elohim, the
they would be,
collective
yeah,
Elohim,
they would be.
the collective Elohim. But then at
Hmm.
some point, you have El Shaddai speaking to Avram, giving Avram the opportunity of a covenant of the future of the world. He accepts, he becomes Abraham. He circumcises himself, formalizing that covenant, and then we're here now, like
Yeah.
thousands and thousands and
Well,
thousands of years later.
you may find this interesting is that El Shaddai means God Almighty. El Elyon
Yes,
means God Most High, right? And so
yes,
even in this primordial prehistoric era, the connection to the highest God was what they were after. Melchizedek, who meets Abraham, is a priest to God Most High, owner,
exactly.
master of
Priest of
heaven and
El
earth.
Eli.
Yeah, El
Yes,
Elyon Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, owner of heaven and earth.
yes.
So when we are aiming at God, we're
I
aiming
subscribe
at the
to that, by
highest
the way.
God.
That's what I
Mhm.
pray. That's what I subscribe to.
Yeah,
That
but again,
exact.
that God is Yahweh, as it says in Deuteronomy. Moses says Yahweh is the God of gods and the Lord of lords,
Sure.
and God is one, right? And
But
so,
the only complication is that when you look at the history of the area of the time, the entire area of Canaan, even though each one worshipped a different Elohim, like in modern day Lebanon, they worship Dagon, they still understood that the Elohim, their Elohim, went through the firmament with El Elyon, and above that was El. That's the confusing part. Is when you look at the history of the entire Canaan, which now they would say is river to the sea means Canaan. At one point was Israel for about 82 years, right? And then this is the entire river to the sea is the argument. But all of these different Elohim uh, all had a tribe of people and all had a piece of land. But it seems that they all agreed that there was El Elyon, like the Most High. Like, for example, Wadi Rum, where Moses received in Midian, where or Moab, when Moses went up the mountain and received the burning bush and received God, right? Guess what? Wadi Rum means valley of the high valley, like meaning valley of the Most High. They
yeah,
were worshiping the priest. There was a priest of El, right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
father was the priest of El, and which means a priest of the Most High, which
yeah.
is what Melchizedek.
El is actually just Elohim abbreviated to just be a
Yes,
singular
but
El. Yeah.
so the way I look at it, and I'm always open for translation. If we look at the that which exists before existence and exists through existence, that which creates, destroys everything that has ever been, exists through and within this force, unformed everything. This would be El. And
Hmm.
in our little dimension here, creation was decided in some other different aspect as the days progressed. And through that firmament, the first breakage of that firmament, this is what I understand them when they say El Elyon, was this most high through that, between El and the creation to come. And then from there, the Elohim are the Mikael, Raphael,
Hmm.
Uriel. All of
Hmm.
these Elohim are created.
Yeah.
All of these initial Elohim, like in the Ugaritic text, they say there were 70 post flood. There were 70 Elohim for 70 tribes and 70 pieces of land, and they named
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, you may find this interesting is that the word for other gods, Elohim, Acherim, Acher means other, also means after, right? So potentially you could say the
Okay.
gods that came after, right, as being like these
Yes,
other lesser deities that are not
or
God himself.
created from. Yeah,
created by God.
that's
Yeah,
why
which
would
is
we think
again,
that yeah, that's
another
why would
another
we
term
not
for
think
that. Yeah, another term for that in the Old Testament is the sons of God, right? And
yeah, better
Christianity
with the daughters of man. Yes.
adopted the Son of God. Jesus is the Son of God. If he's the Son of God, he's definitely not God, right? Because he's the Son of
Yeah.
God. And the Son of
Yeah.
God, the sons of God are actually referred to, as you mentioned, with the Nephilim. And I wanted to bring this as an example of angels having free will, is that the sons of God choose to go against God and have sex with human women, which is something God clearly
Yes.
doesn't want, right? And so you have an example of angels and humans simultaneously deciding to defy God together and go against him.
Yes.
So I certainly
Yes.
believe that even angels who are clearly in the presence of God, even humans when they're in the presence of God, are capable of defying God. And it would seem that that just
At a lower
drives
level,
home.
though, it seems that between El Elyon, right, which would be the beginning of this experience, this third dimensional experience, like the highest we could even, like, if it were to break free, we would be witnessing through or El Elyon itself. And then it seems like there were like the angels that seem to exert only one direct actions, which would be called like archangels in English. And then down below that seems to be where all the spirits and all this other stuff. It seems that there's some
Yeah.
sort of
I
hierarchy
mean,
for
yeah,
sure, which
for
that's
sure.
outlined in Judaism, though.
Yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy, and it's hard to conceptualize exactly what that hierarchy is because we don't know much about it. And this is another thing to consider: is there's a verse in Deuteronomy that says, "The hidden is to Yahweh our God, and the revealed is to us and our children to do as the words of this Torah." And so, there's this attitude in Judaism in the Torah is that we're not going to know the hidden. In fact, Genesis starts off with the story of earth, right? We're not told much about the heaven other than that God created the heavens and the earth. We don't know what's going on in heaven. We hardly know what's going on earth, right? I mean, they say like 80% of the oceans are undiscovered even by humans. And that's by modern standards where humans have like tried to track the whole earth. But
Yeah.
still,
Yes.
most of existence is unknown to us, past, present, and future. And, it would be obscene, as you mentioned earlier, humans worshiping science. Science is the human attempt to understand reality. For you to deify your own understanding of reality above God and above, the unknown, which is the truly honest response is like, do you know what happened on Earth 10 million years ago? No, right? But a scientist is like, but I found a tooth in a cave, so I
I
know,
can tell you.
right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, no, you
Yeah.
can go
Yeah.
shove that tooth up your
Yeah.
ass, like I don't actually believe
Yeah.
these people. It's funny.
No.
I was talking to a girl and she was telling me like, oh, like there's scientific evidence that there's no such thing as men and women. Men could be born in the wrong body. I was like, well,
Yeah.
there you
Yeah.
go. Like that just shows you that science is a fraudulent institution, right? It's like if the people that claim to understand existence can't even differentiate between men and women, then they're
Well,
just
show us a scientific fact. Give me one scientific fact that's universal.
Mm-hmm.
There's none.
Yeah.
There's
No,
none.
look, I'm not saying science can't, discover some obvious things. But again, at the end of the day, we exist in the unknown, and it's meant to be that way. God made us limited in that sense, and even to the point of envisioning God. Moses, who's the closest to God, is told that he cannot see God's face and live. Right? That's just the
How
nature of
about
man.
Enoch? What about
Enoch,
Enoch?
yeah,
Isn't
I
it
mean,
funny?
yeah, he's
You have
fascinating.
seventh generation. You have Adam, then six in between. Then you have Enoch, who's the great grandfather of Noah,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who, by the way,
Was taken by God.
yeah, what becomes the Metatron. But
Well, yeah,
let's forget
that's
about.
so. Look, the Book of Enoch would be an apocrypha, kind of like a mythology spin-off on Enoch. All we know about Enoch in the Torah is that he, as you said, descendant of Adam through Seth, the great grandfather
Yeah.
of Noah, and it says that Enoch walked with God. And so, by the way, that is like the ultimate praise for a man. Walked with God,
That's all we
right?
need to know. The
Noah
final
walked with
outcome.
God, right? And Noah walked with God too. But the outcome of Enoch was he walked with God, and then one day he was no more, for God took him, right? And so, you really don't even have such an idea coming up next in the Bible until Elijah, who was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire,
Yes.
right? And so you have this idea of just a human just being taken. It's almost like without going through a natural death or something, would seem. But
But
yeah,
but it's funny too, because people think that that's supposed to. That we think so human. Like when we say the Anunnaki, what would they look like? Well, they would look like us, but they'd have bigger muscles and be twice as tall. It's like, well, maybe. But we think there's someone that's superior, supposed to be a more superior version. We're the stars of our own reality show. So of course God is going to be on top of the highest Mount Olympus, and he's going to have a gray beard, because we're all looking for daddy at the end of the day. And then and when you realize that for thousands of years that was the depiction of God, then you realize also that, by the way, that was the depiction of Baal, as well as the early depictions of Yahweh, which was, or they say, oh, that wasn't Yahweh, that was Baal. Okay, well, not according to the early Yahwists. Not according to the early Yahwists. They described in their independent writings just like Baal, which is just like Zeus, which is just like Santa Claus. And again, my main point is to say that God, in the highest form of us understanding, is formless.
Yeah, well, don't forget,
God cannot be a man nor an idol, etc.,
well,
etc.
that's the first two commandments. And to get back to Christianity,
that's the truth for sure.
Not to rag on Christianity too much, because I do like the Christians, but worshiping Jesus.
Well, you know what, Christian. Let me for 10 seconds. I love Christians. They're some of the best people on earth, and they're some of the most beautiful things that have happened for the people that are suffering the most in the world. For example, the thing in Haiti, there was more independent private donations given by Christian Americans than the entire governments of all the world combined. That's a beautiful thing of Christianity. But when we're talking about people, and we're talking about belief systems, how they were created, and who lies to them now to keep them structured within the pen to collect the money. And that's in all the religions. So we're specifying very clearly. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Absolutely. And again, just to worship Jesus as God is breaking the first two commandments. The first commandment is do not worship
breaking
other gods.
Jesus' commandments, by the way.
Jesus
the
is
laws
not...
Jesus subscribed to directly is the Old Testament.
Sure.
Jesus would have never.
Yeah, he called himself the Son, and he spoke to his Father, although he did leave some clues that he wanted to be worshipped, which is why I have a problem with him. That was
according to Matthew. That was that's written 80 years after his death.
I know, but again, then we don't know anything that he said. So either you
we have the Gospel of Thomas. We have the Gospel of Thomas.
Okay. Well, look, there's a lot of Gospels, but
no, but Thomas was the apostle. Thomas the apostle, and he has the scribe, maybe the brother, and there's 117 sayings that were found in the Nag Hammadi library, and it matches with the earlier depiction that the Ethiopian Coptic Christians have, almost word for word, and it's simply 117 words, and if 117 sayings, and if you read them, they kind of seem like a Buddha, but nowhere in there did he say he's God, and that's why you can't canonize it. You can't have these guys saying he said he's God and this not saying. It has to be distinct, and it has to be thorough. All the rabbis agree that we need 13 challah on the table. You know what I mean? Like, we have to make decisive decisions.
That's more accurate to the rabbinic conversation. How many challahs do you need on the table?
No, we have to yell. We have to argue for 7 years and write every word of the argument
down. How many
down.
ounces do you need to have a proper blessing on the wine? Yeah, no, it's definitely
And the answer, Rabbi, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the answer to that one.
You need a cheekful. It's comical at best. It's disastrous because it's just not the substance of the Torah at all.
It misleads the people.
But
it makes people crazy.
Yeah.
Imagine if every little thing you do, you're being controlled, and you're so worried about being right and wrong. Not because you know God's, because they told you when you're a child that if you don't make your bed, someone's coming to get you. Like, if you're not good, Santa Claus is not going to bring you. There's no difference to this. Like, don't we think, like the Baal Shem Tov said, like the Torah through the heart, like the essence, right? The Shekhinah, the divine essence of the breath for the next one's not promised. And in a single breath, we inhale, that's the blessing. The exhale, we live in the existence of a life, right? And at the end of it, the next one's not promised. And so the thoughts and the intentions of that breath that happened during that exhale, that was a single lifespan. And if we were just to dedicate one single breath or one single life into a true prayer once a day, it's going to be more effective than just reading something and rocking 5 times a day or 3 times a day. Yeah. I'm talking everybody, Jews, Muslims, Christians, going somewhere once a day.
Scripted, predetermined, repetitious. It's cult behavior. It's just there to make people mindless and not actually speak in their own words. There's no commandment in the Torah to pray. Prayer is just simply your dialogue with God. So open your mouth, talk to God. What do you have to say? I think
I
that's
like to go biblical with it. Like I'm thinking, how would at the time of John the Baptist, like you want the covenant, we're making the cut, we're doing the baptism, or we're doing the baptism, making the cut. I'm not here to say which one happened first, right?
you got to eat
But
locusts if you want to be
like
a
Solomon.
student. No,
Solomon?
John the Baptist apparently just lived off of locusts. Because he was like living in like in the field or something.
Oh, yes. So according to his tribe of the Mandaeans, that he was going on like pilgrimages and going on fasts and going on like spiritual missions, and he'd come back like more enlightened, and he would never take anyone with him. And the closest, you know who the Mandaeans are?
No.
So the Mandaean, the word they were a Semitic tribe. They were originally from I believe they were originally from Assyria. They were from Samaria. They were from the northern kingdom, and they, according to their history, they left something like 20 years after the Assyrian invasion. So it's like 740 or something like this. They said that the corruption between the priests and the rabbis were so dirty that they decided to leave, and they just simply went east. They were on the line of the northern and southern kingdom, but they basically just went east and hit the Jordan River and stayed there, right? And so the word Jordan is the word for river in Mandaic in their language, and so Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist, right? And being taught the 5 books.
He was like their Messiah. Yeah.
Well, no, actually, hold on. Here's the thing: they believe that John the Baptist was the Mashiach, and they said that Jesus was the false Messiah, the evil sorcerer, and the dark one. These are the exact words that from. Funny. Yeah, and they have a book.
They have a book apologizing. In the New Testament, it says that John said, there's going to be one who comes who's greater than me.
Yeah,
I'm not even worthy to tie his shoes.
Yeah, so the Mandaeans specifically say that once that Jesus had more power and magic than anyone except John, and the only reason they didn't kill him in his sleep to save the world was because John said, "Don't worry, the light of the Father will purify him eventually, and I will take accountability for him in the meantime." And when John the Baptist got his head cut off by the king of Babylon because the woman wanted to see his head, then that's right after that, it's same year, that's when Jesus decides to make his move and arrive, fulfilling the prophecy of Mashiach, to arrive on a donkey with disciples on Passover in the Holy Land. So he was raised in the 5 books, scriptural Judaism of the Mandaeans as well. But according to them, they say he was the evil sorcerer, the false Messiah, the false light, and the dark one. Yeah. So they have 4 books. 2 of them are about that. Yeah. Anyone should look into that. So if you want to know what the tribe of John the Baptist, if you want to know what the tribe of John the Baptist thought of thought of Jesus, go read the Mandaeans. We'll put the name of that. But there were so many other Hebrew tribes at the time, like the Samaritans.
Sure. The Essenes.
How are the Samaritans not Jewish? Right? The Samaritans seem to.
They're the kingdom of Israel.
Convert to the, huh?
Yeah, Samaria was the kingdom of Israel.
Yeah, the Samaritans today, like if you look at their perspective of Judaism, what it is and what it is not, they're just basically specifically saying that the rabbis polluted everything once the priests were once there were no more priests because there was no temple, then the rabbis took over and took the place. Here's a good question, right? There's rabbis and there's priests, right? Mm-hmm. Well, without the temple, who's the priest? Now there's only the rabbis.
Yeah. Well, historically, actually, the Sadducees were the priests and the nobility of Israel, which is interesting. But rabbi is not a position that exists in the Torah. In the Torah, there's priests, prophets, and judges. And so, I suppose rabbis would be closer to judges. But there's
teachers,
still,
no?
Yeah, but there's no. What I'm saying is there's no position in the Torah called rabbi. That's a modern idea. Rabbi just means master. Actually, it's like, you know, the master of the Torah.
Oh,
Yeah, but you
there
know,
we go.
the biblical positions are priest, prophet, and judge. And so, um, you know, I'd say that a leader falls somewhere there. You know, there's princes, there's nobility, there's kings, there's lots of different places that people can occupy, but there is no priesthood. You know, the priesthood is
Yeah,
dead. You know, there's no
that's
temple.
it,
There's no actual line of reliable descendants of Aaron. You know, who can claim that they're priests. You know, so the Jews have a lot of problems on their hands for sure in terms of how to reconcile their history. But I think that if we started following God, it starts with the Ten Commandments. It starts with the basics, and then we can build up to, you know, a temple and stuff like that, and a unified
amen.
people. You know, but
I'm
that's
with you
a
100%.
you know.
I'm with you
Mhm.
100%. I have some theories, and I'd love to share them with you and tell me if you think they make sense. Like I understand, like, you know, like when we say like Erev Rav, right? We're pulling it from Genesis
Exodus.
12. What?
It's
Yeah,
from Exodus.
it's in four parts
Exodus,
because as
when the Israelites left Egypt, it mentions them.
yeah, I think that's Exodus 12 first, and then goes all the way to like Exodus 45. There multiple times they're referenced regarding, as you said, disobeying the
No, but
golden calf,
that's what I
etc.
was trying to tell you is they're not actually referenced in those scenarios. That's a midrashic interpretation that the people who were pushing for all the evil in the desert were the Erev Rav, were the mixed multitude. But in the Torah itself, their only mention of the mixed multitude is just the fact that a mixed multitude went up with Israel from Egypt. But there's no indication that they were the source of the evil. That's an entirely rabbinic
Yeah.
formulation.
So to clarify, what you're saying specifically is the concept of Erev Rav is literally only mentioned once, and literally
Yes.
is means mixed multitude, which could be interpreted whatever, but it means mixed multitude of
Yeah.
humans is the
Who
reference
went
point.
up with
And
Israel from Egypt.
yeah, who went during Exodus from
Mm-hmm.
Egypt through the unknown journey, but which we know of now. And
Mm-hmm.
so what the rabbi is basically saying is that reference outside and beyond that is literal is interpretation, and has been expanded on since those days extensively. And what he's saying in essence is that is a scapegoat basically, because you could just say it's like saying the devil. You like a Christian can say Lucifer. Oh man, I ended up drinking last night. Well, Lucifer got me, right? You're saying it's basically a spiritual scapegoat, right? I
Absolutely.
don't know what got in. I don't know what happened. Must have been the
Yeah.
devil,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Mm-hmm. No, yeah,
but
that's
here's the
exactly
thing,
what it is.
and I'm with you on that, and that's the truth. So we have to recognize that. But there is something to be understood of the existence of both good and evil, and how it encompasses and can go into a human. For example, a dark spirit can enter you one of two ways. Number one is invitation, right? If you make sacrifices and trying to summon darkness, think of the Germanic occult through Nazism. Think of Satanists through Aleister Crowley and lots of the secret societies they use sex, drugs, and sacrifice blood to create these, right? So the same mechanisms of sacrifice for good, so to speak, can be utilized for bad. The interactions of which you'll see is a jinn, which means spirit. On whatever level you want to call it, whatever, it's a being that's appearing through smoke or fire, etc. It's not um, anything beyond that. So for me, like when I look at Rabbi Yochai's interpretations of the Erev Rav and the Zohar, it really resonates with me as a student of history, because the desire. Let's look at ancient Egypt, right? And so, in not ancient in the form of the time of the Pharaoh and the time of the Exodus. That's not ancient. That's Middle Kingdom Egypt. Ancient Egypt was called Alchemet, and Alchemet had two sciences that was put forth. The first was alchemy, which was a science of spirit. And then the second was chemistry, the science of matter, right? And in alchemy, in essence, is taking a plant and using water, fire, alcohol, and today we use chemicals as astringents to get something out. They were looking to extract the spirit, thus alchemy, right? The separation of spirit from matter. On the other side would be the chemistry. And the chemistry is looking for components. For example, taking a coca leaf and looking for the active ingredient for cocaine. It would And the difference is the difference between drugs and medicines. A medicine can be a plant, and a drug is a chemical, right? A chemical drug would be like taking a human and just killing them to get a liver to sell it, right? That's the way I look at it from that perspective. But through thousands and thousands of years, and in Alchemet, we knew that it was basically, brother, a rainforest. That's how they had access to all the plants and all the medicines, and then they had all the stuff. Eventually, they started to become corrupt. And this is where the Pharaoh concept and human gods start to come in, right? Now, they were breaking a commandment before it was spoken, but somehow we always knew. And it seems in the earliest understanding that the people knew that God's not supposed to be a man, and we're all looking up towards the skies at a higher force. But then eventually, and almost inevitably, that higher force said, I'm here now in the flesh. I'm Pharaoh, right? Bow to me. And people just start bowing, right? And they have priests, right? But the priests were the most corrupt ones. And so the priests were the ones that were playing between who was going to inherit next. And just like it was in all the religions, and just like it is today, ladies and gentlemen, let's open your eyes. And eventually, what this luscious jungle of Alchemet would inevitably, at the time of Moses, become a desert, right? And eventually, whether we went spiritually corrupt and doing deals with jinn, dark spirits, for power and control and illusions of control over others. If someone were able to present the illusion of power into the psyche of another person, that's black magic. This is sorcery. And so, whereas I have some Jewish friends, beloved brother of mine, he said, no, the Jewish people went in as like a secret mission to extract the magic, so to speak, from Egypt to take it to a clean place. Like what is the Hebrew word for the coating, the over you, the shell? What is the outer shell? There's a word for it.
Klipa.
Klipa, yeah, the klipa, yeah. And so, like, the Egyptian people are like a klipa for this, right? And then on the other side, you could say that these Hebrew people through Moses, they understood this stuff, but the idea that the Pharaoh, after these 10 plagues, right? Let's say it's all literal happened, sending in those sorcerers and magicians that Moses defeated, sending them in with the Hebrew people to uncover the source of this extra magic that we don't have. Very logical to me. No understanding the time periods, because that was the control. And the Pharaoh and all his magicians and sorcerers, according to the story, just got defeated by a single man. So if the Pharaoh can go back out and say, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't defeated that spirit, but that spirit is part of us. And now I have a new higher name of God. And now we are Tutankhamun became Amenhotep, became so on and so on, which eventually becomes the sun god himself, right? Which happened ironically at the exact time of Moses, where he became the sun god, and all the other temples got banished except for the belief in the one God. So they actually did go to a monotheistic version. Of course, this guy is God in the flesh and so on, but that's what happened. So it's not hard for me to see that that people in control of power wouldn't send evil. And I always understand that everything does have to do with these things. Like, I used to think we had a religion problem in the world, and then I realized we had a spiritual disconnection problem. But over the last few years with the pandemic of COVID, I realized more accurate than not is that we have a magic problem. We're all under a spell. We have the black mirror, right? We're all abracadabra. We're all under a spell. We're taking the remote control and we're changing the channel, right? And we're uploading the program, and then it ends and we go and fulfill the program and bring it more into this earth. The second way that a spirit can come, the second way spirit can come through is through fear, right? Where a ghost goes, and you go, and that's how possession happens. Two ways: you call it in, or through fear. And look at the world we live in. You have a world, right, where then you fast forward, right? And this concept of an Erev Rav, and then you have a Sabbatai Tzvi, and then you have and you have all this Erev Rav, and then you have the Roman Catholic Church of Paul. Paul is an Erev Rav. If you just accept the Erev Rav concept, you start recognizing, because no better word I can describe evil. No, Erev Rav. Paul's an Erev Rav. The Pope is an Erev Rav. The Saudi royal family is an Erev Rav. The royal bloodline, and doesn't mean the Jewish, because they're not Jews. That's the point. Is
Well,
George
I
Soros not
think.
Nerov?
Well, again, I do think evil people is a better way to refer to them. They're just wicked.
But we need a name
Um,
for their group.
just wickedness, evil people. All people can choose to do good or to do evil. And as described to us in Genesis, it's not up to us to decide. It's up to God to decide what is good and evil. And we have to follow him. And, you referenced the Exodus from Egypt. And I think that the resounding message of the Exodus from Egypt is that God is the one who crushes Egypt. Egypt calls themselves the economic and spiritual superpower of the world, and God completely does away with them in a series of weeks, to the point where their entire military, along with their pharaoh, are drowned under the Red Sea, and it's a wrap. And so
Yeah.
I think that
Do you believe that literally?
yeah, I do. And
Okay.
I think the response to evil is that evil has no power in the face of God, right? And so if
Yes,
you're
when you don't
with
have the
God,
fear, it doesn't have
yeah,
power.
and if you're with God like Moses was, right? Somehow Moses was able to walk in and out of Pharaoh's palace unscathed, telling the king of Egypt, what the hell is wrong with you? You got to send these people away. Why did Pharaoh just kill him? Clearly Pharaoh had no control over Moses, and that's the thing, is if God is with someone, they're untouchable, and I think that that's really the message of the Torah, is that the response to the evil of humanity, to the scheming nature of, as you said, the cabal, the evil, the people that are actively trying to manipulate the world to propose evil agendas for humanity. The only response to that is God. Who can take us out of slavery? Who can take us from under tyranny? God. That is the message. And just to call back to what you were saying about God not
Sure.
having a form, I think that that's so important. And that's actually the second commandment, is do not take any form of the heaven above or the earth below and make it into a graven image and bow down to it. There is no defined image to say that is God. Oh, that statue is God. That face is God. That no, right? God is beyond our comprehension. He's beyond what we can even see. We can't even see his face and live. That's what man has to know. And the minute that people think that they can, go shake hands with God and be all buddy, what they're really doing is just worshiping themselves. As you said, it ultimately just comes to, oh, I'm God in the flesh. I'm God, and it's all
That's what
downhill from
drives me.
there.
Yeah, that's what drives me crazy, is because people are like, God feels, God thinks, what are you talking about? Like, because to me, like, the
Well,
line is so
sorry,
clear.
just not to interrupt you, but that is clear in the Torah, that God has emotion. I don't think emotion is, limiting in any sense. God has
No,
sadness,
but
he
it is
has wrath.
personified though.
Yeah,
Something would
it's
have to have
persona.
a
Yeah.
parameter to have the encompassment of more or less of something to determine happy or sad. That's see,
Yeah.
I'm a purist with it. Like I'm a, like
But
I'm.
I think there
Let me
are
give it Rabbi. Let me give an example.
I think there are existential truths, though. Like it's
I believe.
existentially true that, like it says, one of the instances of God's emotion is at the flood. It says God was saddened to his heart when he saw that he was going to have to destroy the world. Like that's a response. We're being told that there is a correct response of sadness, and God gets wrathful when the people disobey him. He gets jealous when the Jews worship other gods. I think it's very useful to know that emotion actually transcends humanity. It's part of reality itself.
But I feel like if something like I see, I understand. I do fully understand.
Clearly,
I
we are not very good arbiters of emotion. Which is why it even says, I don't know if you know about the commandment of tzitzit, to wear
yeah
the
yeah.
tassels on the four corners of the
I
garment.
have some.
Awesome, and they're supposed to be wrapped with a blue string, actually. And what it
That
says
comes
is,
from the shell. That
well,
comes
no,
from the
see,
snail shell.
that's rabbinic. That's rabbinic. And the Torah doesn't say
But
anything
that,
about it doesn't say
no, but
anything
the
about a
reason was
snail. It just says
no,
blue.
because that blue only came from that at the time.
It
It
just
was the
says
second
blue.
most valuable color to the purple from the.
Yeah, I mean, again, but the color is stated as blue, so I don't think it really
Uh,
matters what the blue is derived from.
oh, I understand what you're
Uh,
saying. You're saying
yeah,
exactly where the blue comes from is irrelevant. The point
yeah,
is
is the color.
the point, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what we're
Mhm.
talking about. We're saying like
Mhm.
We don't need 25 additional books to teach
Yeah,
what the
to tell
five
you
did.
which snail it doesn't matter. It matters that it's blue. And what it says is, you shall see the tassels, the tzitzit, and remember the commandments that God gave you, and you shall not pursue after your heart and after your eyes, which you stray after them. Right? And of course that speaks right to this point, is that even though we have vision, as God has vision, we're in the image of God, right? God has vision, God has emotion, but we are limited in our vision and in our emotion, and we tend to stray to the wrong places after that. So we're not supposed to follow our own fleeting emotions and our own misinformed judgment. But I do think that God exists in the perfect state of emotion, intellect, spirit, all, like the unity of all aspects of existence, being to the state of perfection and all powerful.
So when I look at yeah, I understand what you're saying. That, for example, like for me, this is such an important line, like to the point that for example, the Muslims, when the Prophet Muhammad was alive, there was, as I said, hundreds and hundreds of years of canonized Roman Catholic Christianity, right? So Jesus was God all over the place, and so that one of the rules that the Prophet said was no depicting God or any of his prophets. So you're not allowed to draw God or Moses, any of the prophets, including himself. So what do Muslims do? They don't draw. You see in the society, when someone tries to draw Muhammad, they go crazy, because it's a very powerful, important rule in Islam. But what you will notice is that they take the beautiful Arabic calligraphy, which is probably one of the most beautiful written languages in the world, and they'll take a prayer, and it'll be like on an apple, or it'll be on something, and they'll kiss it, and almost like it's an idol, a lot of Jewish people look at holidays. They look at holidays so important, almost like they're worshiping the holiday. Christians, obviously, we can always just point to worshiping who they believe the Messiah to be as God, right? I'm like Hasidic when it comes to all this stuff, bro.
Well, I
go.
appreciate. Well, I mean,
I go like,
ironic
no.
that you say Hasidic, because the Hasidics are actually notorious for worshiping their rabbis. And I think you bring up an interesting question of worship. And I often have
I
this.
mean Hasidic in the definition of the word.
Oh,
I mean the
pious,
definition of the word.
pious.
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah.
the definition of the word, like.
Yeah, being pious. Yeah, Hasidic means, it comes from the word Hesed, which is like, loving kindness, but also like piety and righteousness. But what I wanted to say is that regarding worship, I think you bring up a very interesting point, which is, people will say, "Oh, I'm not worshiping this thing. I'm not worshiping this person." But if your actions betray the fact that you literally are bowing down to this person slash spirit slash artifact or item, that is worship. And I saw that personally. There's a Hasidic rabbi named Rabbi Nachman. I don't know if you've heard of him. The rabbi
What's the other name?
The rabbi of Breslov, Rabbi Nachman. He's one of he's like a descendant of the Baal Shem Tov. And
You're talking about you're talking about the Rebbe?
Yeah, so not the Chabad Rebbe, but he's another example of Jews worshiping him as the Messiah. That's even recently, in the past 30 years. But this guy Nachman is from Uman, Ukraine. From like 200 years ago, and
the Holy Land somehow.
Yeah, the Holy Land, Uman, Ukraine.
Somehow.
And he writes in his books that the only way for Jews to be saved from hell is to come to his grave on what the Jews call Rosh Hashanah, which, by the way, is a complete scam. Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year, and they call it the New Year, even though it's not at all the New Year. It's the 7th month of the year, and it's in the Torah. It's the day of remembrance. Okay, but they call it the New Year, and it's a complete lie. But either way, he tells them to go to his grave on the day of remembrance, which the rabbis claim is a day of judgment, where God is making a court case for you, what he decides is going to happen to you the whole year, right? And so they've fabricated this drama where it's like, this day God is deciding what's going to happen to you the rest of the year. And so it's a fear-mongering tactic, to get people on their knees, like, oh, God, don't kill me this year. And it's like, you should be on your knees every day.
That's the fear I was talking about.
But again, it's the false fear creating, claiming that they know that there's a court case in heaven and all this stuff. It's not in the Torah. The Torah is a day
Yeah,
of
yeah, but the
remembrance.
fear inside, the fear
Yes.
inside, the fear inside, or the love inside, or the hatred, that's real. The only thing that we can say is
Exactly.
truly real is our emotions that we feel, because it's literally the definition of our temple. Our vibe is the vibration going through your temple,
Yeah. And
right?
so just
That's
so you
this
can
water
see,
body.
yeah. And by the way, what that fear does is it causes them to leave their families on the holiday, go to a third world country in Uman, Ukraine, that live in squalor, because there's literally piles of garbage like 10 feet tall and like 5, 6 men
Sounds
sleeping in like
sounds
bunk
like the
beds.
Ganges River in the Hindu festival when they go
Yeah, so it's,
to.
it's it's like a festival like this, and they're all going there just to pray at the rabbi's grave so that he should save them from hell. And it's like,
Are
okay,
you inviting
well,
me there? Is that what's going on here?
well, no, I've actually been there, just to
Yeah.
kind of see what was happening, and I just,
Yeah.
I saw it's like disastrous. Like this is really what's going on. And people say, oh, I don't believe that he's God. I don't worship him. It's like, but all of your actions show that you worship him, because you're kissing this grave and you're bending down and you're saying, oh, you're my savior. You're like, what point, if you're literally praying to this guy, um, that's worship to
Yeah,
me.
that's what it sounds like, and that's what I mean. Like, look, of course there are teachers and there are prophets, and I believe like the Messiah. The Messiah is a light inside of all of us, and it's our job to find that light and to like turn it on, so to speak, right? And in our light, we'll be able to inspire others to find their light, and thus will be the era or the age will happen, right? This is what I believe. I use the analogy like, in the Matrix 1 and 2, right? So everyone, remember in the Matrix, you've seen, right? The
I've
Matrix?
seen the first one.
Okay. In the second one, they end up going to actually Zion, where they're under the ground. And they're like, we have an important message. And it shows like seas of people, almost like an Exodus, like at least 600,000 people there. And they go, we have Morpheus has returned with great news. And everyone's like, oh my God, Morpheus has returned, because they all believe he's the savior. And Morpheus is like, hello, children. He says, children, I have come here to let you know very soon I will have found the one. And they're like, yay. And they're saying yay just because the one they believe is the one is telling you that he's going to find the one. And so when Morpheus finds Neo and convinces him he's the one, the only difference in the real world and in the Matrix is between Morpheus and Neo is Neo simply believed he was the one. Morpheus didn't have the true faith inside of himself. Thus, he was not a true believer in whatever he believes. And there's a difference. So it's a scapegoat prophecy, and it's a scapegoat mentality. Because as long as we're waiting for someone else to come, we're waiting for someone else to come.
Yeah, well, I fully agree with you, is that in an individual sense, you are the one applies to everyone, right? Every single person is the one version of themselves. And this idea, again, of waiting for someone else to do that for you is the most destructive thing possible. And it's been used to control the masses for thousands of years. That's why I love the 5 books of Moses, is because it's an individualistic religion where God is communicating with people. And Moses himself is described as a humble leader who takes none of the credit for himself. In fact, there's a beautiful story where
except for one time.
Where's that?
Moses, we're thirsty. Moses, and then he grabs the staff,
Where
and
he hits
says,
the rock.
He hits the rock. He goes, "Must I do everything myself?" And then he got banished. Then because he said, "Must I?" Not
that. Well, in fact, in the moment, you're correct. His sin was hitting the rock, but in that moment, he actually was upset at them. He said, "Like, listen, you rebellious ones."
No, he's not mad
right?
at God.
Yeah, but in reference
I don't
to
blame
him saying,
though. Can you imagine?
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't blame him either. But it's
600,000
also,
Jewish
this is
people
like
yelling at him every day.
This is like so many years down the line. I mean, it's devastating. These people really were horrible, and so but still, God, you can see how much God cares about how to act. Like, because there are times where anger is justified, but that was specifically a time where God didn't want him to be angry. And it's so fascinating. But the story I wanted to tell you was in the book of Numbers. Moses actually tells God, the burden is too great for me. God says, okay, call 70 elders, and I will take some of the spirit that's on you and I'll share it with them. And he calls them, and 2 men didn't show up. And when God came to God came to reveal himself to these men, they all prophesied, and even the two men who didn't come prophesied in the camp. At that point, Joshua got very angry and came to Moses and says, you got to lock them up. Like, they're criminals. They're prophesying in the camp. They shouldn't be doing that. And Moses said, like, are you being zealous for me? He says, if only all of God's people would be prophets, that God would place his spirit on all of them. It's not a crime to have prophecy, like in the wrong place or all this stuff, right? And that's Moses, that's his attitude, is like, I want all the people to be able to achieve this. And I think there's a real possibility there that just because there are leaders, and leaders are not a bad thing, but true leaders are just there to
Sure.
serve. They're there to serve the people.
Sure.
There's one of the beautiful quotes when Korach is this Levite who rebels against Moses, right? And he says, "Oh, we're all holy. Why do you think you're greater than us?" Right? And Moses is like, "Of course, I didn't choose this. God chose this. And additionally, you're a Levite. God gave you the privilege to serve your people. And you're just getting greedy and you want more." He's like, your greatest privilege is to serve. And I found that to be so beautiful. If we are given the privilege to serve humanity, to serve life, which is ultimately in service of God, then we have everything to be happy about and to be content with. And that's really the purpose of our lives, is to do good and to serve God for eternity. And that's the thing about God, is God is eternity. And so there's no point in your existence that you will be separate from God unless you actively try to distance yourself from God, and
yes, the intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so
we're going towards something. We're moving forward at all times. It's the question is which direction you're going. Like that's one thing that I think people
and by the way, the salvation as it's presented in Deuteronomy, in the 5th book of the 5 books of Moses, is you and your children shall return to God, and then he will return you to the land, and he'll favor you and make you great, right? Which is calling to the individual and their children. Again, God saying, you and your family, you are the foundation here. God tells all men and women to come together, become one flesh, and be fruitful and multiply. Each unit of male and female has the ability to reproduce and create the next generation of followers of God. And if us and our children were to return to God, we would see redemption. And so it's a call to the individual. It is not a call to wait on a savior Messiah. It is a call on each and every one of us to become parents, which is a huge responsibility, and then to return to God along with our children, so that it should be a long-lasting tradition that follows even to our children. And that's something God says about Abraham, to bring it back to him, because it says in Genesis, God says, "For I have known him, I have known Abraham, because I know that he will guard the way of Yahweh to do righteousness and judgment, and he will teach it to his children for all the generations." Right? And that's the way of Yahweh. It's tzedek, mishpat, righteousness and judgment.
Tzaddik.
And God knew
Tzaddik?
that. Yeah, tzaddik. Tzaddik means righteous one, and tzedakah means righteousness, and mishpat means judgment. And God is saying, that is my way. That is the way that he knows Abraham is going to guard. So if we want to be part of that covenant, we have to abide by that. And the Torah actually is a guidebook to a revelation that God gave us literally 3,500 years ago, that has stood the test of time and has served to be the foundation of the world's greatest religions and civilizations. This is the revelation. This is the law, and we shall not add or subtract. I think it couldn't get clearer than that.
I wonder, like, I think there are certain things, like, for example, if the whole world was to observe the Sabbath.
That's a Talmudic statement.
No, I'm saying, it's my statement. No, my personal statement.
Okay.
I've never read the Talmud.
Yeah, so the Talmud says that if all the Jews were to keep the Sabbath, the Messiah would come.
No, I'm saying the whole world. World.
The whole world, yeah.
If the whole world were to shut down all the distractions and be present one day and one night a week, I think we would change a lot of things.
I agree.
Like in Islam, they have Ramadan, and where everyone fasts during the hours of the sunrise to the sunset, right? And so that way, the concept behind it is good. Number one, so you can always feel what hunger is, and realizing that someone else has it every day of the year makes you more humble. And then the other perspective of that is that for 30 days from sunrise to sunset, everyone feels the same hunger. Thus, everyone is in the same desire to find, right? And that's a beautiful thing for sure. No, but some things I say may be right in alignment with a certain Talmudic perspective, and some may be completely against. Probably more against. I don't know, but
Well, I
no, I'm
like what you're
saying that
saying about it being a human thing, and in
the whole
fact,
world, yeah,
I mean, the Sabbath comes all the way from creation. It's the fifth commandment of the Ten Commandments. It's certainly foundational, and although again, it's the sign. It says, "This is my sign between me and the children of Israel," is the Sabbath. There's no indication that other people shouldn't be keeping the Sabbath. In fact, the Talmud says that non-Jews who keep the Sabbath are deserving of death, which is quite despicable for them to say something
what?
like
Then
that.
I would be. Then I'm not in good shape.
Well,
If
yeah, I'm
that
just saying that,
prophecy is true, yeah,
but it's
yeah,
not a
that prophecy
prophecy.
is
It's
true.
it's it's a it's a dogma and a propaganda and a
Who wrote
man-made.
which rap? Who wrote that? Do we know the author of that trash?
I mean, I could
Whoever
probably
wrote
find
that,
it
we should
here.
dismantle. We should. I mean, not dismantle. We should disregard a lot of the other sayings.
Oh,
It's like
absolutely.
trying to say. It's just like, look, I get it about. Look, I understand like when you say someone like false idols, and I understand. Do I think that gay people should be killed? No. Do I do I think that? But do I think pedophiles should? It publicly, yes. You know, I feel that someone who personally were to kill a pedophile would be doing a good deed. I think that the angels will be shining on them more than the other
Omar,
person. This is like I love this conversation, and then the platform is that we would have like, for example, we have like a Christian scholar, an atheist philosopher, a Jewish rabbi, and a black and a Hebrew Israelite, right? And there's going to be a debate. And one with you, I would think it'd be something less silly. It would be something more of like different perspectives of Judaism, right? I think like, for example, or like, and then other positive conversations or debates of like, how can we all rise to the next level? Oh, well, the Buddha says this. Well, the Torah says this. Like these are types of conversations
yeah.
that people need to
Well, look,
see
yeah,
to
I'm sure
rise.
there's that's another thing that's beautiful is once we get past this dogmatic adherence to every religious text, then we can just cherry pick good ideas and just leave the bad ideas behind, right? It's like if you have a nice quote from the Talmud, go ahead and say it. If there's a nice quote from the New Testament, say it, but you don't have to then accept the entire canon as being the gospel.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's all filled with false idols. Like for example, when in the New Testament they say that Jesus was questioned on something, and he said, "I did not come to change the law; I came to fulfill the law." Right?
mhm,
Clearly, in that one sentence, that they all his apostles and all the canonized agreed that that's a true statement from Jesus. He's telling you he did not come to change the law of
right.
Moses.
Yeah, but then there's other statements
So
attributed to him where he does criticize the law of Moses. So it's like there's a lot of contradiction
with
there.
like
And again,
well,
like
there's a couple that I don't necessarily disagree with when he was questioned about healing someone on the Sabbath.
yeah, but that's
Um,
not Moses. That's Pharisees. He's arguing with the Pharisees. That's different than arguing with Moses. But there are things where he
oh, I
says
understand
like,
what you're saying.
yeah, there are things where he says like, Moses says if you sleep with a married woman, that's adultery. But I say even if you have thoughts of adultery, it's like committing adultery or things like that. Like where he
Oh,
goes,
oh, well,
he just well, that's all in the New
that's
Testament.
silly. How
Of
I have
course it
thoughts
is.
of all sorts of shit all the day. I'm not being judged on my thoughts. I mean, I wrote him. I wrote one. It's not my book. It's not in but I have. It says, um, uh, fortunes gained through. It's basically this, what is the harm done by he who knows his evil within and never harms another? Yet what is the harm done by he who knows his light and never shares it? Like, which
Mm,
one's worse? Someone
mm,
who's something's wired wrong in their head, and for some reason they have this crazy thought, like they want to kill, or a lot of these serial killers, they say that there was a dark spirit telling them to do it, or else, right? They were
yeah.
getting haunted until they did this thing, and then
Hmm.
they would be left alone, and then they'd be haunted. I mean, there's like 100 of those. It's like case studies of this, which
Hmm.
means this person's possessed with something, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, and then or someone like thinks like to steal or to harm, or whatever it is. People have thoughts. Some do it, and some don't do it, right? So, which one's more of a righteous person? The one who's being harassed by the idea of doing evil and never does, or the person who knows their light and never shares it? Which one's more harmful to humanity?
Sure.
That's
Yeah. And
the
by the way,
question. I don't have
yeah,
the answer to that,
yeah,
but we
the
need to
Torah
think
is
about these
is
things.
almost entirely action based, although there are definitely spiritual inner commandments as well. In fact, the 10th commandment is do not covet, right? Do not desire what doesn't belong to you, what belongs to your fellow. So I think there is a level of inner work that we need to do. But
Yeah.
action is for sure the most significant thing. Is like what are you gonna do? You know, that's where like the real the rubber hits the road. You know, that's where it really happens. But I
Well,
mean,
it's like
I did.
levels of vibrations, right? Because a thought is still a vibration, but it's a less of a materialized than the words. A word is
Yeah.
much right, and then the actions of the movements is the third, right, or the most
Mhm.
dense. It's all
Yeah,
about
I mean,
density
you
levels.
can't compare someone who's thinking about murdering to someone who actually murders. You know, but I like the idea about freedom of thought. It's something that I conceptualized when I was trying to break out of the mind prison. You know, is like the first step to freedom is freedom of thought. Because even if you have freedom of movement, but if your entire head is conditioned to believe something, you're stuck. You know, and so freedom of thought really is the first step towards achieving real freedom. Um, and Yeah, I mean, we need to have that the ability to experience all the aspects of ourselves. You know, not to run away from our darkness, not to uh, be deluded by our light, but just to see things as they are. And that's more in line with God. God is synonymous with reality, you know, and so for people to believe in God and then to remove themselves from reality is contradictory. You know, that's it's not going to work.
I agree. And then people are saying one thing and then doing another.
Yeah,
You know.
hypocrisy. Yeah, which is another
Yeah.
thing Jesus criticized the Pharisees for, hypocrisy. And look, at the end of the day, when you have the Torah, there isn't a lot to be said uh, beyond that. You know, it's like you have to follow this. It doesn't really matter whether Jesus even existed or not. You know, it matters that you have to continue. What are your obligations to God today? What do you have to do as an individual? That's unchanging, really, over all of human history. And so we just have to take up the mantle as individuals in every generation, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, what you're going through. Um, you still got to do the right thing, you know. And I do want to push back a little bit on kind of your.
Please.
I don't know if this is a
Of
good
course.
road to even go down, but I
Go,
figure
brother. Free thought unchained. See, you have the free thought. Now you have to
yeah,
unchain it. You have to break the
yeah.
chain. You're
So,
putting a chain
but
on your own thought.
no, I'm going to say it. I'm just prefacing that. But when you're talking about saying that you don't believe gay people should be put to death, but you do believe pedophiles should be put to death. And it's like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm just curious what the basis for that is, because in the Torah, there is no penalty, explicit penalty for pedophilia, although I'm definitely think it's a great evil.
Um,
I
it
mean,
may have just
other
been
than like,
understood that they kill on sight.
well, I
I
mean,
mean, you
you
have
know,
like
like I think you
you
should
have
deal with like you should lock criminals up. You should definitely punish them. And there's,
I
you know,
can explain my thought process.
but I'm
Gay
just
gay
I guess my
person as
point is that it's not
no, that's a
that's
good
not
question.
biblical.
Like,
It's not biblical.
no, it's okay. One is doing harm to yourself, and one is doing harm to another. The imposition of your will onto another person without their consent.
Right, but if
That's
it,
the difference
what
between.
stand I understand, like that's the logic of it. But as far as morality goes, I personally only base my morality off of the Torah. And so, you know,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
the Torah
yeah.
explicitly says that homosexuality is worse, or at least has it's not qualitatively worse, but
What
the
does it say
penalty.
specifically? I'm not familiar. What the
A
what it
man
says
who
specifically.
shall lie with a man as one lies with a woman shall be put to death. Right. That's
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
the statement about
That's pretty
statement
clear.
about
Yeah.
homosexuality. But with regards to pedophilia, first of all, you know, nowadays they say like 18, 17, 16, you know, like what exactly is consent? But you know, even if you take it down to say like sexual maturity and stuff like that, I certainly believe that it's disgusting and should be, you know, enforced. Like law enforcement is just there to make people not be abused. It's just abuse, right? It's
Yeah.
like
I can
if you
explain that
go.
one too.
So I
I can
definitely think
explain that.
people should be punished for abuse. You know, if you beat
Yeah.
someone, even if they're not a minor, you should be punished. In fact, like I told you, if you cut
Depends on
someone's
what they
hand
did
off,
first.
not as an act of self defense, but like you're just a malicious
Yeah.
person and went and cut someone's hand off, you get your hand cut off. You know, if you
Yeah.
go knock someone's eye out, you get your eye knocked out. An eye for an eye, right? That's the
Yeah.
Torah standard. So, you know, I don't know if you rape someone, do you get raped? You know, that I don't think that's
Well,
exactly it. I don't think that's exactly the idea. but the point
probably
the
not.
point is,
I haven't thought that
probably
far
not.
into that one.
Probably not.
Yeah, I haven't.
But
Who's
my
going to
point,
have to do that? Here's the problem with that, right? This guy rapes this woman. Okay, now he has to be raped. How do you rape a man? Like,
no, you're right. You're right.
To have
I'm
sex,
joking.
you have to be sexually stimulated. It's like when they're raping a prisoner. Oh,
Well,
that's
also,
not gay.
yeah.
I'm sorry. To even get hard to have sex with anybody, you have to be stimulated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How can I rape a man if I'm not excited? Like if I don't find, if I can't even think about kissing a guy, how am I going to get myself stimulated to rape a guy who deserves to be raped? Like that, I don't even know who's going to be the one.
Not to mention, you wouldn't be allowed to, you know, fulfill, like that would be, you're not allowed to have sex with a man. So
that
wouldn't be a solution
either.
No,
I don't eat pork either. Like
I know, 100%.
And
I
I'm
was
circumcised. You know what I mean? Like
that's great.
we have all, you know,
you're 3/4 of the way there. But
well, Pashtuns, we circumcised on the 8th day.
Really amazing, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's the commandment.
Yeah. Well, because you know what Pashtuns are. Pashtuns are where, you know.
Where are you from?
We track back
Afghanistan.
Yeah. Well, we track back to. Yeah, well, Pashtuns is like 56 million people, like the largest patriarchal tribe on earth, and we track from father to son lineage directly to Isaac, Jacob, through Joseph and Benjamin. You know, this whole concept of Afghanistan revolves around King Saul. We call him Malik Talut's grandson, Afghana.
Yeah.
So the entire Pashtun history tracks.
Yeah, the entire Jewish nation.
But that's why we're not Jewish, though. We would be of Hebrew descent. Jewish is a faith.
Yeah, Jewish
Hebrew
is like
a DNA.
Comes from Judah. Is the term Jewish because
like
Judah was
Judah, which we're not. We have no.
Yeah,
so we have no Arab or Judean connection.
Cool. Yeah, I mean Judah was the last remaining, you know, kingdom in Israel. That's why they call Jews Judah. But the reality is, all of Israel was exiled. Both Judea and Samaria, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom.
750 AD, then like 528 or something. 728, 550.
Only a very small group of Jews came back with Ezra to build the second temple. You already at that point
and then they came back with
full exile, and then they were exiled again.
With two different Talmuds. They came back with two different Talmuds.
Yeah, and then they were exiled again.
Babylonian
in Jerusalem. Yeah.
And let me answer your second question.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had the second point, and you asked me about. You said gay people, and I said doing harm to themselves as opposed to doing imposition of their free will on this against someone else's free will, right? That would be that. And the second thing you said was about the second question you had. You said was about. You said something about Talmud.
My only point. No, we were talking about the Sabbath.
You asked me. You said the gay people, and there was the other thing. Oh yeah, pedophile.
Yes.
Yeah. I believe. I mean, listen. Whereas, of course, I can't. I have a 13 and 11-year-old daughters. Like the idea that at 45 I would be interested in marrying a 13 in any way whatsoever to me is crazy, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't live in 700 AD.
Right. That's another thing is that you have to consider.
I don't know what I would be like either.
Right.
I have no idea what that would be like, so I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, you have to consider.
But I know that. I know what I like, and I know I know what I like, and I don't recall ever seeing anyone who's 13 fulfill it because I like brains and I like breasts, but that's the interesting thing, like between and then the interpretation between like the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. I mean, to answer the question, you have like Yavamot 11b. That's only in the Babylonian. This is the 3.5-year-old.
Yeah,
you can marry the 3.5 to have sex with that. So
that's where the anti-Semitism,
the Babylonian Talmud.
Yeah, well, that's it's like saying that like according to the Bible you're allowed to eat shit. It's like you could, but like it doesn't mean you should.
It's shit kosher. It comes from a human. It's a human product. But then we drink milk. It's hard to say. Well, this is how. By the way, this is how Talmud happens.
Exactly. All the gray area spiraling into into demented
People,
lunacy.
I believe that people were trying to do right, and people were also trying, like always, now and then, people were trying to make a name for themselves in their industry of choice
Yeah,
at
they
all
wanted to
times.
be the
Okay,
most creative, the most revolutionary in their
most
thinking.
most
Um,
most people in America right now would change places with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but in Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos world, they can only think about each other, because they're the only they are the NFC AFC, right? They are the Eagles and whoever and the Chiefs, and that's their problem, because they're exercising the free will of wanting to be the Pharaoh. Like there's so many lessons that can be taught with that, but probably at the times of these throughout the course of the rabbinical, back and forth, they were trying to uncode and decode and demystify things for people, but of course they were trying to rise up the social ladder and gain more followers and become, and why do I think that? Because it's human nature, and that's the thing, that it's hard to avoid, and that's why we have to keep ourselves in check. For me, that's why I luckily was able to discover like plant medicines and live for years in the jungle and like find, really go on a true, Moses was 40 years, I was 3.5, but it's all it took with me because I had ayahuasca, and to really like center myself in that. And I'm have no problem saying, like, do I know the exact name to call God in its highest form? No. But is there such a thing?
Like I said, we only know what's revealed to us.
Yeah.
That's kind of the human condition. But again, just to point out, like these horrible statements about men having sex with 3-year-olds are all from Talmudic sources, right? So it's the Talmud and it's the Mishnah or the Midrash that says that Isaac married Rebekah when she was 3 years old, which is disgusting. Like
it's a good
vile.
point. Very good.
And
very good point.
Zero evidence for such a disgusting claim.
Meaning it's not in the Hebrew Bible. It's in a later writing.
Exactly. That's why. So I think it's self-evident. Yeah. It's self-evident that men should not be having sex with children. I mean, it's like vile. And I think, in a land with law enforcement, abusers and criminals would be put to justice. My only pushback on you was that you were kind of questioning the biblical stance on homosexuality versus this. And I was just saying, I think we should stick
I'm not questioning
to biblical law.
Oh, no, I know fully that they're supposed to be stoned to death, executed in some way, for sure. I was just saying with my personal thing that if someone decides to, so for example, if you look at yourself as a temple because you house the if you house a soul, which is the eternal part of eternal life, that's where then we're embodied in this breath with this Shekhinah flowing through this physical piece of right, this physical body, right, and we're breathing and we're experiencing this. I don't understand necessarily the distinction or difference between harming yourself through that or harming yourself through drugs or harming yourself through processed foods. What's the difference between some, a gay guy having sex with men, free will exerted, and someone becoming like 500 pounds and then someone becoming a heroin addict? I'm saying my point is that I don't think any of them are good. I'm not saying that anything is good.
Sure.
But I don't know if I should kill any of them.
One of those is defined by God as being a moral abomination. And the other one is more just, neglect and weakness and lack of discipline, and it is a bad thing to do, but it's not, I would say, again, like corrupting the structure of male and female is particularly abominable, it seems, in God's eyes.
I understand the point. You're in essence saying that if there is a little bit of leeway, then that gives way to the golden calf. Like next thing you know, you're going to have the golden calf, and then you can see that in Israel today, right? You have like, there's
Israel's
the gay rabbis.
Israel, by percentage wise, is one of the LGBT capitals of the world. One of the top 10.
Wait, let's talk about that for a second, because to me, when I hear of the covenant from Isaac, then Jacob, and then Jacob becoming Israel and fulfilling a prophecy in the land of which this land would be named that, right? There's three components to that. There's a land, then there's a people, and there's a book, right? The book is the law, right? And the history, amongst other things, and the history. the book meaning the 5 books, right? So the
Yeah.
5 books, which
Mhm.
consolidates everything for the people on the land, right? And that's Israel, right?
Mhm.
That's
Correct.
Israel. I didn't know that the prophecy is fulfilled when you have Christian Zionists in Texas in 2011 start GMOing, trying to make red heifers, and then spending $500,000 to try to fly them over there to try to fulfill the prophecy, trying to speed things up. That's a very Christian thing to do. You know, I don't know that promoting the largest gay pride parade in the world in what part in Israel
Tel
was that?
Aviv. Tel
Tel
Aviv.
Aviv, promoting the largest gay pride parade in the country in the world, is really fulfilling that prophecy of Israel. I don't
Not at
think
all.
you know. Well, of course, the
Not at
answer is of
all.
course
I
not.
mean, look,
I,
here's the
I
thing
don't think that
about
promoting. By the way, one last one. I don't. Well, not one last, but one more. I don't think that, uh, having Netanyahu going up there and saying, "Oh, by the way, celebration has occurred. We are the most vaccinated country in the world." So we're taking, this like Nazi injection from Pfizer, right? And we're going to fast forward past World War II and inject and brag about being the most vaccinated,
sure,
genetically modified. So there's something
sure.
off with all that, and that's where that
Oh,
Arab Rob comes
I
right back.
mean, yeah, Israel is really you either have extreme secular Jews or extreme Orthodox Jews. And again, I like how you break up this dichotomy of land, of book, land, and people, right? And throughout Jewish history, you have a variation of the Jewish people having the land, not having the land, being a people united, not being. But really, the failure has been to just follow the Torah. And that's really why I've undertaken this task to be a rabbi and to teach people the Torah, is because that is what's lacking. Is like the people, even if the people had the land, if they were not following the Torah, they would lose the land, which is what happened, right?
It happened over and over,
Yeah. I mean, by the way, this is
over
a
and over.
history most people don't know, is that
This is very important.
King Solomon, who reigned over Israel in the most prosperous time for Israel, at the end of his life, started worshiping other gods, and God took the kingdom away from him and made a northern kingdom, a southern kingdom, and you have civil war, and basically you have only evil kings for the rest of Israel until they're fully exiled. You have like 2-3 righteous kings, but everyone else is just evil, worshiping idols, and completely denying their obligations as Jews. So again, to just point out, Jewish history is evidence that the Jews have been doing a lot wrong. And anytime a Jew is doing something wrong, you can trace it back to him not following the laws of God as they are written in the Torah. And
That's my point. There's, but a lot of it's not even secretively. A lot of it's openly.
oh
Like
yeah, mm-hmm.
the concept, you can actually, the funniest part, you can actually, Mendel, go pull up on Wikipedia, just type in atheist Jew.
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
that makes no sense. Go to ChatGPT and
well,
say,
Zionism. If you want to talk about Zionism
well,
is
we really need to,
atheistic. It's an atheistic Jewish movement that claims that the
by
land
design.
belongs to us. The land belongs to us, but we don't believe in the God that gave us the land. It's
Oh no, they didn't even
terrible.
care. They didn't even care. They didn't even care which land it was. Herzl
Mm-hmm.
was pulling up. Hold on,
I
what
think
did
he
Mendel
wanted to
pull
do
up
it
here?
in Uganda.
Yeah, that was Uganda, and then and one was in South America. Okay, this is Wikipedia. No. Yeah, so you can say, can you be an atheist Christian on ChatGPT? It'll say no. Can you be an atheist Muslim? No. Can you be an atheist Jew? There's the
Yes,
explanation on
culturally,
ChatGPT.
ethnically, but does not believe in it. Yeah, yeah,
I dare you to try to
100%.
find Arab Rav on ChatGPT. It won't pop up. Mendel, go to Wikipedia, pull up Wikipedia. It's less common and more
Less common
complex.
and more
What?
common.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean it's accurate though. I mean the Jew.
Unlike Judaism, it includes an ethnical and cultural identity separate from religious belief. See that? Separate from religious belief. Interesting. There's no such thing without the book.
Yeah, yeah. Yet
They
somehow
were Hebrew.
yeah, the Jews
They
have
were a Hebrew
managed.
people. They were a Semitic tribe called the Hebrew people who were given a covenant outlined in a book. with
Yeah.
five in a series of books. Correct?
Yeah.
That's the entire premise. Without that book, is there such thing as Jewish? The answer is no. Is there
No.
such thing as Semitic tribe of the Hebrew? Yes. Are there other Semitic tribes? Yes. As of Shem after the flood, etc., etc., etc. Right? Uh, Jewish atheism. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Zionism was created by a man named Theodor Herzl, who himself
Hmm.
didn't claim to be Jewish, was born Jewish, who had a
Hmm.
Christian wife, who had 2 Christian children, who went to Christian church, who also kept a diary. And I suggest anyone go and read all and as much of his diary as you can find. In there, you will find 3 letters back and forth with the Pope. Okay, read what he said with the Pope. You can write it off and say, oh, he was just saying that to get his way. He said the same thing to everyone, and look at what has happened from it, and tell me if the guy was sincere in the fact that he said a land for the people and a national ideology. The language of modern Hebrew was created at that exact time. The first Zionist Congress was like 1897. Herzl's writings were like 1860s or 70s, something like that. But if you follow the track of it, there is no difference between the mission of a Theodor Herzl and a Shabbatai Tzvi, who was a crazy person, according to what they say, who had Nathan of Gaza, who was a respected rabbi, respected man, who said, that's the Mashiach. And everyone goes, Nathan, that's the Mashiach. Who said? Nathan of Gaza. And the Mashiach, everyone, right? And they say whether it was like 1 million people or 1 out of 5 or however many people he convinced, ultimately convinced a large amount of the Jewish world that the Mashiach has arrived. People, as you mentioned, Rabbi, people were selling their stuff and trying to get to the Holy Land as fast as possible. The guy goes to, Turkey, Ottoman, and he goes in to talk to the Sultan and comes out 3 days later and said, by the way, I'm Muslim and I suggest everyone converts to Islam, right?
Yeah.
Would that not be an Arab Rav move, right? Now,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
80
not.
years later, you have Jacob Frank, who did the exact same thing, said he was the reincarnation of Shabbatai Tzvi, and then what did he do? He marched them into Poland and converted them to Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all speaks for itself at that point, and what's funny is even Theodor Herzl, I've read, was a spin-off of a popular character in like a British novel of like a Jewish hero who brought the Jews back to Israel. And so it was part of the culture at that point, and he was basically the fulfillment of a cultural icon. And again, like I do think it's ironic that the first group of Jews who succeeded in bringing Jews back to Israel in 2,000 years was a secular movement. I think it tells you a lot about how inept and incapable the Orthodox were, because they were just literally living in the ghetto waiting for the third temple to fall out of the sky, waiting for the Messiah to come take them on the wings of an eagle, due to all of their superstitious propaganda of the rabbis. So it's very unfortunate that you either are completely secular and then you have a land and you have a military and you have capabilities, or you're completely Orthodox and you sit and read Talmud all day and argue about
Here's some quotes from Herzl.
how to wash your hands.
So I have a book, right? The Khorasan. It's a book of poetry and philosophy. You can judge my inner thoughts by reading this, right? Here's one of
Awesome.
Herzl's quotes. If whole branches of Jews must be destroyed, it is worth it as long as a Jewish state in Palestine is created. What kind of Jew would say that?
Yeah, apparently he was an anti-Semite.
He was an anti-Semite. He in his I want people to go for themselves, but in his second letter to the Pope, he said every day that he wakes up and is not in church, as he gets away from church, he realizes the not is it poison or the virus that is Judaism that is inside of him, and it would take at least 2 generations to go away. And he said the quicker we get a homeland, Pope, then the quicker we'll be able to eradicate this from the face of the earth, for all the Jews will come because the prophecy will be fulfilled. That's why we have to have Israel and Palestine. This is the fucking guy writing it, man. So the idea, and that's the idea that we're going, and by the way, the entire concept is an ideology. It's a national ideology encompassed in a state, right? Well, what was fascism? in Italy? What was Nazism in Germany, right? The German people weren't Nazi. Nazism, an ideology that German people subscribed to. It took over a state. And that's what the secular concept is. It's like, here we are, right? And so if you say that this is the prophecies fulfilled, and by the way, to just to not point the finger too hard, there are 56 million registered Zionist Christians in America. 56 million. So the perspective of Zion, whereas a lot of the Jewish rabbis and people would say, oh, the Zionist Christians are our greatest allies. Yeah, I guess, except for one thing. They believe that for Jesus to come back, Jesus comes back only when the Antichrist comes. So who's the Antichrist? Well, the Antichrist will appear. So they believe that the Antichrist will only appear when the Jews today, because they don't realize that the Messiah already came, being Jesus. So what they need, the Jews that are trying to if you don't accept Jesus as the Messiah, then you're a Jew, right? And so the Jews are going to bring forth the new Messiah, which is the Antichrist. So they need the Jews to have Israel. They need the third temple to be rebuilt so the Messiah will come. And then they know that's the Antichrist. And then Jesus is supposed to come back. Do you think for a second that any of these Crusader Christians are going to sit back and wait for Jesus to come, or are they going to start the first forced conversion, as they say, will happen immediately? Well, let's think about that for a second, right?
Well, I mean,
and then simultaneously,
the Christians have a pretty spotty history with accepting Jews. They definitely.
They have not spotty. The entire concept of anti-Semitism is a European creation. The anti-Semitism is a European creation. Anti-Semitism. When did anti-Semitism happen in the Middle East? And then they say, oh, what happened in Spain? Everyone got expelled from Spain. If you weren't Christian, you got kicked out. All the Muslims and all the Jews got expelled from Spain. You could say that it happened in Morocco. Okay, all that other stuff happened after World War II, after the British controlled Palestine, and that stuff happened. And by the way, when they moved the European Jews into the lands of Palestine to make Israel, they kicked out everybody. They kicked out all the Palestinian Muslims, all the Palestinian Christians, and the Palestinian Jews. Everyone brown was kicked out. The Europeans were brought in, right? And this whole concept, like when they're saying, like, oh, we're surrounded by Arabs. Where was Moses from? Like, where was Abraham from? Abraham was from Ur, which is modern day Iraq. He's not from Ukraine. Like,
sure. Mm-hmm.
Moses wasn't from Yugoslavia.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a racial thing.
It is, though. It is actually today. It's being presented. In my opinion, I'm watching it as.
I don't think it should be a racial thing. Maybe is a better way to say.
No, but Zionism appears. No. Zionism, the ideology of Zionism as a national ideology for a state, as opposed to the Jewish state of Israel, right? Why else would they be arresting and fining people who are on the streets on Friday, asking people if they want to wrap tefillin in the Holy Land? Why would you be persecuting these people in the Holy Land if it's not against Judaism? Why would it? And by the way, I'm spanning it across. Why would the new crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who is by default the leader because he's in control of Saudi Arabia, which has Mecca, why would he pass rules saying turn down the call to prayer from now on? He said turn it off. They said, what do you mean turn it off? He said, fine, turn it down 45% everywhere, but you can leave it 100% during the holy day, during Ramadan and Eid in Mecca. These are flags. It doesn't matter what you want it to be.
Well, I mean, modernly,
Mendel's. What is this? Oh no,
it's the Antichrist.
Him? Oh shit! No, we don't need to see that, Mendel, because I have no idea what those people are. We're not gonna sit here and watch that video. We'll do that some other. We'll do that some other time. But don't you? you see what I'm saying, right? Like,
Yeah, well, secularism is on the rise, and ultimately, religiosity is kept almost as a remembrance, like an ethnic, cultural thing, as opposed to a serious view of reality. And again, I don't know what justification there is for the Jewish people to be in Israel other than the Torah as a source of, it's like a deed claiming rights to this land. Otherwise, I don't know exactly what rights they have. I mean, I suppose through
a good
warfare,
a good friend
but
of
they want it.
a good friend of mine, Rabbi Harry Rosenberg, great man, like a brother. He said that from the Baal Shem, from his belief is that in order for the land of Israel is a spiritual unification. In order for Israel, the spirit of Israel, to be alive, not just in possession of land, like for the point to be, for the blessing to be materialized, so to speak, that all the tribes have to be returned. And he cites back to one of his descendants, which is the Vilna Gaon. He said the Vilna Gaon spent the second half of his life writing about this exact point: is for Israel to be Israel needs all of the tribes, not just two of them. And it's interesting because when you look at the story, you have the Assyrian invasion with the 10 so tribes from Samaria being displaced, which they just
Mhm.
simply went east. Some say as far as India, but they definitely as far as Afghanistan, which is next door to Afghanistan's India,
Mhm.
and then Iran in certain places. And then you have 200 years later, the Babylonian invasion of Judea, and then the
They're
Judean
exiled west,
exile to Babylon. Yeah. Um,
Babylon, and then they end up in Europe.
Yeah, they went back. Well, they went Babylon, but it's interesting because during that time, that 500 something BC time period, that's where the Babylonian Talmud comes from when they were exiled in Babylon. And when you look at a lot of the real, like, oh, I don't know about that, and you compare it from the Babylonian Talmud to the Jerusalem Talmud, it's not there. It's not in the Jerusalem Talmud. It's in the Babylonian Talmud. What happens when you live with pagans for 500 years?
Definitely worse. It gets
What
worse.
happens when you live in modern Rome?
I would
You
say
become Roman.
I've read parts of the Jerusalem Talmud. It is very similar to the Babylonian Talmud.
Yeah.
It's a lot shorter, but yeah, you're definitely right that the majority of the like the crazy shit is
A
in the
lot of
Babylonian Talmud.
a lot of it, like the Yavamot
Yeah,
11b I mentioned, that's
yeah,
Babylonian, right? But in
sure.
Babylon at the time, the elites were able to do those things.
Hmm.
That's the problem. The
Yeah.
elites were able to marry children, not the average person. Like a lot of these rules, these things that are in
Hmm.
place that fall into the Babylonian Talmud were only being utilized by the elites of Babylon at the time, not the average
Well,
person.
yeah, the whole rabbinic system is an elitist system that generates all of the power to them. Even though they have no actual legal power, because the rabbis have always existed under the current government, whether it was the Babylonian government, the European government, American government. They don't have any actual legal power, but they have power over minds and souls and the way
Yeah,
people
which
live
is
their
power.
lives, which is power. And
It's given
so that,
away. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's given willfully, through the way people are raised and conditioned, brainwashed. And so um, they have a very effective system that's been in place, but they're all about elitism, and they're all about driving the power to themselves, and ultimately it's about following the rabbi with blind faith. And I like to say blind faith is reserved for God, not for humans. And
I have a writing that says all faith is blind because it requires you to believe in something you've never experienced.
right, and then who would you place that kind of faith in? The statement of some
Whoever tells you they know the
Babylonian
answer.
rabbi? Right. Yeah, that's the thing. It seems to be very easy. Shabtai Tzvi was such an insane person. He invited everyone to his wedding, and he
To marry
unveiled the bride to marry the Torah
yeah,
scroll.
to marry the Torah.
Right. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a red flag? Wouldn't that be
Just
a
a
red
little.
flag?
Just a
Let's
little.
pretend that we believe. Let's say you and I, we're two Jews. We're running around anywhere. We're running around the Middle East. We're trading stuff, right? And all of a sudden, dun, 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 we hear the Mashiach has arrived. And we look at each other, we're like, it's go time. And we head there, right? And we're blessed enough to pay enough money to the rabbis to get to sit down at his Shabbos table for the wedding,
Yeah.
right? So not
Exactly.
only are we going to have the divine, you know, union of God and His bride. But tonight we're
of
going
the
to witness the
Trinity.
marriage. We're going to witness the marriage of Shabbat Hasvi and his bride. No one knows what her name is, but we can't wait to see, for she must be holy too. And he unveils the Torah, right? We will look at each other, and everyone will look at each other. Some people will be like, what the fuck was this? Right? Some people will think, what the fuck is this? Most people will look around to see how many people stay, right?
But look, I would say once you're already there, you've already sold your soul, right? It's like, the mere fact that people are sitting here waiting for a Messiah and even believe in a messianic figure coming and, doing this thing, all of it is just not, it's not what we're supposed to be looking for. We're supposed to be looking for self-improvement and individual connection to God. And there's one mention of a figure who causes obedience of the people. Almost sounds like creating world peace. In the blessing that Jacob gives to Judah, he says, "No, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples." I don't know if you've heard of the term Shiloh, but Shiloh means the tranquil one, right? And this tranquil one will come and create obedience among all the peoples. That's the closest thing to a messianic figure I've seen in the Torah. But
that's
again,
that's Genesis 49:10. Shiloh,
okay.
Right?
I don't know the exact source, but it's definitely the end of Genesis.
I think I do. I think
That's
it's
cool.
Genesis 49:10. But Shiloh is also a state, though. That's the the state of peace, and the description of that could be a state that is either within one or within all, and that could be the messianic state. That's the problem.
Right. It's an interesting.
And in my opinion, I mean, obviously, like
the only reason why I would say no is because it says, "To him shall be the obedience of the people," but at the same time, you could say, "To it." Right, like to it shall
but
be.
You could say to him, meaning the entire tribe is one, to one living organism, to one Israel.
Yeah, but saying the obedience is to Shiloh. But you could say that the obedience is to it, to this state of tranquility.
I see what you're saying. You're saying the Hebrew word could be translated to him
to him or to it,
interchangeably.
Yeah. That's how Hebrew works. If you're referring to a person, it's him. If you're referring to an inanimate object or to a concept or to a collective, right, you'd say it.
I see what you're saying. So it easily could be the reference to a single individual through him, or it could be what I said to it. It could be either, and just the one took off.
Yeah, I like your take on that.
Yeah, I just uncovered that recently. I just have I have a great memory with important things, and then I can't remember anything else also simultaneously. But that was part of my thing with the concept of Mashiach. I was looking and I was like, where's all that coming from? And I expected to uncover massive amounts of prophecy about that, but there's not much.
Nowhere. In the Torah, it's nowhere. Again, this would be the closest thing, and even the way you read it eliminates it being a single individual. But even if it is, it's not the center focus of our faith, and in no way does it
it's not supposed to be. You're saying
it's not supposed to be. Yeah, it's not supposed to be.
It is for people.
Yeah, it has become that for both Jews and Christians. But it's not a good path. It's the rejection of self and of individual responsibility in relation to God.
It's appeal to tradition.
Yeah.
It's appeal to tradition.
One of the things that is attributed to Jesus, that he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. Only through me can you get to the Father." Right. That is definitely probably one of his most problematic statements, among other things, where he says, "I and the Father are one, and if you have seen me, you have seen the Father," and all sorts of things like that. But just this idea that this individual is the pathway to God, that there is some sort of break off between you and God. In the Hasidic tradition, there's the same idea.
I think that's a bunch of that stuff.
The Rebbe is the pathway, or like the pipeline to God.
I see what you're saying. You're basically saying that the distinct points within the interpretation of what Jesus said. Like, I think that's a bunch of that Matthew stuff that was added like 86 AD, and they say it wasn't even there before.
That is Matthew.
Matthew is one of the books.
Matthew is the first book, though. So
No, but there's different versions of Matthew's. The problem is they have different variations. They have a canonized variation. So they
and it
say
just doesn't really
there's
sound
a guy.
like a reliable text.
I agree, but there's a guy, Bart Ehrman. He's phenomenal when it comes to this stuff, and he was basically talking about how a lot of the Jesus referring to himself as the pathway and so on, most of it's from Paul. But then a lot of the stuff was later added in. But then when you track with the Septuagint, I think is the Greek New Testament, it's not in there. For example, the virgin birth, the concept in the Hebrew word for young lady, and then the Greek word for virgin they use, and then the Greek Septuagint was translated to virgin into the English and King James and all that. Therefore, Jesus had to be born of a virgin because the Greek Septuagint said so, but the original concept was talking about young lady, for example. So those are intentional.
The original verse is in Isaiah, where it says, "Behold, the young maiden has conceived," and they say, "Behold, the virgin," even though the word is not virgin.
It's
but then the alma, and the word for virgin is betula. So it's quite literally not the word for virgin. And then, but the first page in the New Testament is the story of the virgin birth. So, so much for that not being part of the narrative.
Yeah, let's be clear here. I'm not in any way. I don't. Again, I do not believe in a human savior to save us all. I believe that's the responsibility within each and every one of us, and we all know that if we were honest with ourselves. And if you look at every prophet, Messiah, they went on some journey of self-discovery, right? They went on the mission, and the point of that mission was to find, and ultimately they found themselves, right? And then they share that message, and most of them didn't write down in real time because they were busy. They were busy trying to help and to share. And then most of those books were written by people later. At least in the Islamic book, it was understood, and it was over a course of decades, and they had the same people with him. It was all memorized, and so there's a trail of it. Could there be contradictions in this? And sure. Anything that comes from a divine source, comes through the temple of a human and gets written down, will always be mistranslated. Nothing can ever be. The entire history of the truth cannot be consolidated to any series of books, yet at the same time can be done in a single breath. You know what I mean? So, that's where I'm at with that. Like I'm not leaning towards. I think that the religion of Jesus as the religion was created. I don't believe, but the same way we said with Shabbat Tzvi marrying the Torah during Shabbat, we would look at each other. Maybe 10% of the people would stand up and walk out. Maybe half. Hopefully everybody, but everyone didn't. Everyone didn't, right? And most of them retreated back to the Seleucian islands off of a Turkish island, Greek island controlled by Turkey, which is a lot of other Arab were created from there. For example, that ruled certain countries. Proven. That's a different subject, but where they convert people and tell people to convert to a different, like, hey, we rule Turkey now. No more Quran in Arabic. Now we're doing it in Turkish. Anyone who says that doesn't understand Islam, and that's exactly what Ataturk did. And he also released the Ottoman Empire to the world, to the British and the French, and said, we're just Turkey now. So then he is from that island where Shabbat Tzvi's island was, where it's as Wikipedia says, he was born there. Anyway, the point I was trying to make was, imagine this. We hear the Mashiach has arrived again, but now you and I are in Jerusalem, and we hear, dun, dun, we hear, the shofar goes off, and we hear, Mashiach has arrived. And you and I look at each other and we run, right, towards the Mashiach. And then we become close with him. So now it's not just Matthew and Peter, it's Israel and Omar, right? And we're sitting at the table with him. And he leans forward, Jesus, and he says, I have a secret that I want to share with you. And we say, yeah. And he goes, I am in fact God. I would look at him and I'd say, prove it, right? I wouldn't accept anybody who's going to, can you imagine? We would laugh. I would first laugh and think you're joking, right? How can anyone think that someone like Jesus would tell someone he's actually God? without having to make very strong proof. Moses allegedly parted the Red Sea. I say allegedly because I just don't believe. I don't believe certain
You don't
things.
believe that God has the power to part the Red Sea?
God's 100,000
Yeah,
million
but
trillion
God parted
percent.
the Red Sea. Moses,
I know.
just
I'm
acting
just,
on
brother. I'm just
God's
honest. I know.
instruction.
I understand the concept. It's hard for me to grasp because there's also like a smaller sea underneath that in certain seasons is a sea and certain seasons it's not. So they could have just went a little bit like 12 kilometers more south and went through that part. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, it says
I
it
don't
was
know.
split, and the whole Egypt had to drown in that, so there had to be enough water to drown them. You
Except
know,
there's no ever written history about this from Egyptian sources. You would think, you know, I don't know.
you would think that
It's
the
hard to
Egyptians, being the
write
egoists they
about their
were,
failures.
would write about their destruction. I don't know, but here
Well, they
I can
wrote
read
about the
this.
sea. They wrote about the sea peoples coming and causing hell.
Yeah,
They got
you know,
controlled by the Greeks and adapted that. I don't know.
but the
I don't
Greeks
know,
much
brother.
later on. The Greeks are much later on.
Yeah, but the entire Middle Hellenistic period was them being conquered and then colonized by the
Yeah, but
Greeks in
that's
many
already
ways, and they.
undeniable. That's modern history. You know, the story of the Israelites is prehistory. So, you know,
I don't
I
know.
don't.
The thing is, one thing that I've come to learn is the ability to say I don't know about things that, like, I just don't know. I don't know.
No,
Do I believe in miracles? Yes.
yeah, you don't know, and
Yes.
neither do I. Neither of us were there. But yeah, if you believe in miracles, meaning you believe in an
100%.
all-powerful God who can bend the laws of nature, I don't see a reason to limit God's power in any capacity.
I'm working on
So,
this one. There's a few things I'm working on, man. I'm in my journey too. I'm working on a few of
for
them.
sure,
Some of
yeah.
these miracles, some things are hard for me to understand. And like, for example, like the concept of like accepting or thinking it's okay to kill the firstborn of everyone if they don't make a sacrifice. Like I have
No,
certain
where
moral
does it say that? Where does it say that?
Passover.
Kill the
Passover.
firstborn.
Yeah, the angel of death comes through and
Well,
took
he
the
killed. That was the 10th plague. That was a plague
yeah.
against Egypt. That he
Yeah, but I don't
killed
know if that's
Egypt's.
okay. In
Oh,
my
you
moral
don't. You're
framework,
saying
I don't know if
right.
that's good.
Well, I
I
mean,
understand
again,
why.
look, it all. God even told the Israelites to kill all the nations that were in Canaan. You know, Canaan. So clearly, we're looking at uh, moral judgments that were made at that time that God
Yeah,
and only God can make. I don't think
yeah.
anyone can take those scenarios and apply them to a modern day and be like, well, because God told the Israelites to kill the Amorites, so now I'm going to go kill my neighbor. You know, that's murder. The same God that told you do not murder in the Ten Commandments told the Israelites in a very specific scenario to kill a specific nation at a specific time.
Yeah.
So
Or
I
like
think
when King Saul was told to kill all the Amalek,
the
and
Amalekites,
he,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So that's what I'm
Amalekites,
saying.
yeah,
It's a very specific scenario at a specific point in time. Nowadays, we don't know. There's no Amalek. There's none of these nations even exist anymore. You
Netanyahu
know.
said there's Amalek. Netanyahu
Well,
said that
actually, yeah, I criticized Netanyahu for that. It was just complete bullshit for him to get up and be like, the Palestinians are Amalek. You're literally
they
saying, I
couldn't
want to
be
kill.
because Amalek was Semitic. They were a Semitic
Well,
tribe.
he knows he didn't even mean it literally. He was trying to use the
Amalek or no,
Amalek metaphor
yeah,
that
yeah,
we
yeah,
should wipe them out. But like the
yeah. Because Amalek was
yeah, but
Esau's
Amalek,
relatives.
yeah, and Amalek, you're supposed to kill their babies. You know, like you can't. That's the Palestinians are not Amalek; they're the Palestinians. You know. Anyhow, I did want to read this statement from the New Testament because I think for as bad as the Pharisees were, and I believe that they were really motivated to kill Jesus for political reasons. But
I
the one
agree.
good point they made to him, this is in John chapter 10, verses 30 through 33.
You have a New Testament there.
No, I just have a
Oh,
screenshot on my
okay.
phone. The Father and I are one. That's what he says, right? The Father and I are
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
Jews took up
You're not saying
stones.
that right now.
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't
I
make that
am
declaration here on
I
Free
am the
Thought
way.
Unchained.
Right.
Okay. Oh shit.
The Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus replied, I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these are you going to stone me? The Jews answered, it is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, though only a human being, are making yourself God. Right? And that's really what they told him. And I think in that sense, they were correct. You know, it's like, why in the world is this guy walking around claiming to be God. Like he seemed to be claiming that in one way or another. And that's why I think he really did set the stage for them to make a religion out of him that worshipped him. And again, to me, it's like, as a Jew, Christianity informs me about nothing as to what the Torah wants from me. The Torah tells me everything I need to know. It would be like saying that I need the Talmud in order to be a good Jew. I don't. I don't need the Talmud to be a good Jew. I don't need the New Testament to be a good Jew. I don't need the Quran to be a good Jew. The Torah outlines the parameters for that, and they already pre-exist all of these other books that come after. So, in some sense, it's almost a work of futility to, delve so deep into all of these different ideologies when the Torah already sets it out for you in a 250-page book that you can read in the course of like 2 weeks. So
yeah, I think one of the most important things that the Christians need to just understand is when they say is to just dive back into the time era, if
what
you
they need to do is start from the beginning. They need to take the Bible and turn it over and start from the beginning, right? They're reading it in reverse.
Well, but they're also just believing. Like, if you tell most of the Christians that Paul never met Jesus, they'll tell you, what do you mean? He met him in the streets on the way to Damascus.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, he didn't. Actually,
you're believing that story. You're choosing to believe that story. Yeah, that's another thing about belief that people don't understand. It's like, you get to choose what you're going to believe in this life and who you're going to believe in this life. Who is your God? What is the truth? And those are very important questions. And no one should be forced to believe things. It needs to appear to you as being self-evident, to the point of knowledge. Actually, in the Torah, we're called to know. God says, "You shall know today and return to your heart. For Yahweh, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth below. There is no other." And to get to the point of knowledge, obviously, it's not talking about scientific knowledge. It's talking about deep knowledge in the core of your being, knowing something beyond even just seeing physical evidence, but just knowing that this is the truth. And again, personally, and I can only speak for myself, that level of knowledge only resonates when I'm speaking of the Torah itself. Once it comes past that, you're really just believing these accounts of random, again, rabbis, priests, saints, prophets, and I don't believe them. And
you're just taking the easy road out instead of actually going and doing
because it's unnecessary, right? It's like, even if you never knew any of these other books, but if you knew the Torah, then you would know what you have to do and you would know what you can't do. And so ultimately, it's the easy way, but it's the truthful way. It's the simplicity of God that's missing. I think all of this overcomplication of religion has left people just confused. You have like thousands of religions in the world, and I don't think that does us much good, considering we're all trying to worship the same God, or we should be trying to worship the same God.
Yeah, it's hard when you consider that there are, a few billion people that think God put himself into the form of a human to then sacrifice himself to make up for the original sin that he passed judgment on the whole time.
But again, look, in the Torah,
it was his law.
Yeah, he killed himself in the form of his son to atone for the sins of the people that he told to follow his commandments. Yeah,
but we have to understand the psychology of a majority of people we're talking about. They believe that when Moses saw the burning bush, that Jesus was in the burning bush. You have to remember.
Yeah, Jesus was everywhere. He was he was in the tree. He was under the sea. He was on the ark. Yeah,
but not the serpent.
No. Well, it even says that in the New Testament, that like, I was there before Abraham, like Jesus says that, right? So but what does it come down to? It's like, if you're worshiping the Son of God named Jesus, when God is the Father named Yahweh, right? If you read the Torah, God is the Father named Yahweh. Well, now, if you're worshiping the Son named Jesus, that's another God. So you're breaking the first commandment. And then if you put this guy on a cross and you sit there and kneel at the cross every 5 minutes and you have a cross everywhere, and it's an idol. So you're literally breaking the first and second commandment, and then you claim to be a continuation of the Torah.
But we have to have compassion. We have to have compassion because when you understand how Christianity got from, this guy in Galilee, and then whose entire like I don't know, what do they call it when you have his entire performance was like less than a year, right? It was like not even a year. And that was 2,000 years ago. When it cycles through Rome, which was the largest superpower in the world, and then it cycles from Rome into England, when England became the superpower, and then it goes where the vessel of Christ on earth is the King of England, no longer the Pope of Rome, right? It's all about the control of power.
It's deep-seated geopolitical, spiritual ideology
Literally.
over thousands of years. And I do think we have to have compassion. I mean, the same applies to the Jews, but it's a hard, you have to strike a balance between mercy and judgment, and at some point, like, the mercy runs out, where it's like, like, when are we just held accountable to, like, wake up?
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
I mean,
there's things
when you realize that the modern depiction of the way people think Jesus to look, when you realize that comes from the Pope, the Borgia Pope, right? Pope Alexander VI, when he had a commission of his painting of his son Cesare Borgia, who was like one of the best looking guys in Europe at the time. They say he was a playboy, but he was also a cardinal. And you see the picture. If you type in Mendel, type in Cesare, like Caesar, Cesare, Borgia, Borgias. When you type in the picture of Cesare Borgia, and you can see that's the depiction that moved forward through the Europeanized Jesus. And it was painted, the one painting was by Da Vinci, I think, but three of the most famous Italian Renaissance patrons at the time painted him. And this same Borgia Pope, which was, Pope Alexander VI, was the family that Mario Puzo used when he created the Corleone family for The Godfather, right? These were the guy. This was the guy. He was the first Spanish Pope. He's the guy who paid off everyone to become the Pope. He's the one who said we need to raise money so we can fight the war against the French. Okay, let's let people pay, and if we're going to assign a certain amount for each sin and have them pay us, right? Yeah. And it's stuck somehow, as if God told that to happen. And but when you see like the Cesare Borgia, which became like the perspective of the white Jesus, and you understand, that's just one picture. And when you
Machiavelli, so Machiavelli is involved.
Machiavelli was his consultant. But you see that picture right there? That's the picture of Jesus from Da Vinci. It's called The Lost Da Vinci. Actually, you know who owns that? It's $522 million painting. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. It's called The Lost Da Vinci. There's a Netflix documentary on that. But if you look at the picture of Cesare Borgia, and that's one of his older in age that he showed. If you actually look at the younger ones before he actually led the war and became he had a special title later in his life. But that's the picture of European Jesus. And so now when you have this new idea of like, that's what's happening in many ways in Judaism right now. Like, I understand, like, Jews, the 2 to 3 tribes from Judea, Babylon, exile, 500 years. They're allowed to go back. Less than 10% go back. Then they get exiled again. And then it goes for thousands of years, all the way to the farthest side of the world, all the way to the frozen tundras of Russia, right? Where they're being persecuted and kicked out the entire time, get settled, told to leave. I understand. I got it, right? But then when they have the opportunity, by any means necessary, even if it's a ploy by Lord Balfour from, and the Zionists to go and basically say, hey guys, Christian world, hey Pope, we've been trying to take the Holy Land back from these Muslims for over 1,000 years. It's very challenging. We've had 3 crusades. It has been difficult. Why don't we put the Jews, the third party, in there and let them catch the heat for a little bit while we regroup? That's why I think it's literally that simple, right?
Sure.
And so then when they bring it back, last part to this, when they bring it back, they move everyone from Europe, right, to looking around, and we're tribal by nature. What happens when the tribe gets back to the tribal area? They look around, they see we're surrounded by Arabs. Well, guess what? The Yemeni Jews are the ones that never left. So that you're looking at a time capsule of what your ancestors look like. This concept of like the Jews are white now or European now, et cetera,
it's just the product of thousands of years of living in Europe. Assimilation, weather, climate, all that.
Like the concept that Mizrahi is like second class. Like it's like what?
No,
These are
it's horrible. It's horrible. Racism is nowhere in the Torah.
it's
Anyhow,
just yeah.
I do have a heart out because I have a class
Yeah.
right now. But it's been great. It's been fascinating, and I pray that we can all access the true divinity, the true God, and humble ourselves to find our own flaws and free ourselves from the shackles of modern day Egypt, if you will.
Amen.
So
And next time we have this conversation, I want to get into like the spiritual aspect of things. I want to get into the concept of the kavod. I want to get into the concept of the shekhinah, the debakor. I want to get into the mystical, spiritual side of things that will intrigue people to start searching.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Rabbi Israel, we're going to have the link for everything as well. Tell Rabbi Israel I. Horowitz at Instagram, right? Israel.ihorowitz. We'll load everything up in there and look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you so much for joining me on Free Thought Unchained. Great journey we had.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Have a great evening.